It so much, and I thank you so much for coming today. I want, gotta get my notes straight. So I'm Kim Hoy. She will be the next president of the International Dyslexia Association starting in January. Thank you, Kim. I'm sorry. The next order of business is to thank the Fortune Academy. Oh my goodness, you will not believe how these people work so hard, bent over backwards, to help us set up all these chairs, get all the tables out. They worked late. They could have gone home yesterday afternoon, but no, they all stayed here and helped us. So I want to thank the head of school, Janet George, who is here somewhere. If you stand or wave, well, she's somewhere. Oh, okay. There she is. You're by the window. I couldn't see. I'm sorry. So she allowed us to come today, but I can tell you that the staff, the parents, and the students were pitched right in and helped us get this together yesterday on their time off, I might add. So thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here. We are fortunate in the state of Indiana that so many groups have come together. I think we work separately, not knowing about others, and today we are in a brand new era. So we've got all these organizations who are coming together to work for our kids, for our dyslexic kids. So I wanted to thank them also. Not only is IDA and Fortune represented here today, but Decoding Dyslexia Indiana, which is the parent group, a parent and educator group. I'll speak a little bit more about them in a minute. They are here today. The Dyslexia Institute of Indiana, whose executive director is Nicole Friege, and I saw her here earlier. Where you are, there she is back there. I believe that the Children's Dyslexia Center, which is in the Masonic Lodge, is there she is. Julie Bohannon is represented here today. There's also the Rudy Foundation, and that's Tridas, who was just waving over here. So we also have definition of dyslexia. It's our first law in Indiana. It's the definition of dyslexia into the teacher code. Josh Clemens, who's sitting right up here doing AV for us today, and his mom, Cheryl Clemens, were extremely involved in that, befriending Woody Burton and Senator Bray, who the two were responsible for making sure that that got introduced into the House and to the Senate, and they were passed unanimously. Isn't that awesome? But we're not done yet. We've got a lot to do, and I'm looking at the people who will be doing that. So I wanted to just say that Decoding Dyslexia Indiana is an informal group of parents and educators who have worked together tirelessly and will continue to do that to make sure that all law is in Indiana that can support our students. Arnie Duncan, just recently, I don't know if you saw this on the Fortune Twitter and DDIN Twitter and IDA Twitter, Arnie Duncan, the outgoing Secretary of Education, just said, guess what? We can use the word dyslexia in schools and in case conferences. That's huge. Yeah, really. I have something that I want you to write down. So take out your pens and pencils, paper. There are two ways that you can help your kids in our state in initiating some further, this is actually not just our state, but in the national level. The U.S. Senate is opening a simple resolution. So it's called that, Simple Resolution 275. And that resolution is to name October as Dyslexia Awareness Month. So if you could please call your senators Coates and Donnelly for their support of that. They both, I believe, I'll stop there. If you could call them and ask for their support, that would be a good thing. The other thing is the House has the House Bill 3033, and that is a pretty amazing thing. They want to the bill is to have $5 million designated, I believe, every year. Is that correct, Cheryl? $5 million every year for research on dyslexia. You will be an important part of that. Please call your representatives. Please call your United States representatives and tell them to support that. They can co-sponsor, and the more you call, the better it is. I once heard that if one person calls, they feel like it's really 10. So if everybody in this room would call, wow, wouldn't that be amazing? We could get a lot done. So we'll be looking also for legislation in the state of Indiana, because we're, as I said, we're not done yet. So a few housekeeping things. The restrooms, if you need them, are down this hallway. There's two in the green hall. The walls are painted green. And if you walk beyond that, there's a bell. And if you walk beyond that, there's a second set of restrooms. At intermission, we will have some refreshments for you. And we'll also have the annual IDA Indiana Branch meeting. So if you're a member of IDA, we would love to have you stay and participate in that. And if you're not a member of IDA, we would love to have you as a member of IDA. And Kim Hoyt is going to come up and tell you about that. Thank you.
Let's step down for a minute.
Not too much further.
No. Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, I was given very specific directions that I only have 3 minutes, which would be an extreme challenge for me. So I will try and do this within that time frame. Being a member of IDA is just one of the most awesome things you could ever do for yourself professionally, for the communities that you work in. You will be in touch with researchers, teachers, professionals that have a lot of interest and a lot of knowledge about working with children with dyslexia, as well as children that have similar learning disabilities. There's various membership levels, and if you go on interdis.org, that is the main website, you will see a membership level page, and you can click on the level that you would like to become a member of. EIDA.org. EIDA.org. Thank you. I didn't even realize that. Okay. I'm going to talk specifically about 3 memberships: the parent membership, the teacher membership, and the professional membership. With those memberships, you get a quarterly publication called Perspectives, and that is loaded with wonderful research and wonderful articles by leaders in the field of dyslexia. Annals of Dyslexia comes out 3 times a year, and it's also filled with many important research articles that will be very, very valuable to you. There's many e-letters. One's called The Examiner. One is Dyslexia Connection, reading and writing e-letters. And if you become a member of IDA at the national level, it's almost like a twofer, because the state branch gets 22% of your dues, which allows us to put on these wonderful types of symposiums and lectures and seminars for the people in the state of Indiana. You also get discounts at registration when you want to go to the Indiana IDA conferences, and this year it is in Dallas, and next year I believe it is in Orlando. I'm not sure where third year is, but they move around to wonderful sites in the US, and they're just excellent conferences with a multitude of professionals that are just loaded with information, willing to help you. If you join at the professional level, you can apply to be included in the online public listing of a service provider. So if you have credentials that allow you to work with children with dyslexia and you want your name published so people can find you when they need help, that is available also at the professional level. And there's also a discounted rate for professional liability insurance. So there are lots and lots of perks for yourself at the national level and at the state level, as well as the professional level and personal level. So I think we're now back to Mary. And she is going to introduce our awesome speakers for today. Ms. Mary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was corrected. It is not a simple resolution. It's a Senate resolution. Autocorrect. What can I say? And it is already passed. But you could call and thank them for becoming a part of that. Or if they weren't, you can thank them for looking to more legislation to help us. I am pleased to present to you Dr. Eric Tridas. I spent a lot of time when I got bios and resumes and all of that reading them, and I know a lot about them. But honestly, if I told you everything about Dr. Tridas, and I told you everything about Sister Gilchrist, you would only hear from me. And that's not why you're here. So I will just say, without further ado, that I'm presenting to you
As a disclosure, I speak for some of the pharma companies, Pfizer in particular right now. What I want to do is really try to give you an idea of how dyslexia can be looked at from the perspective of executive function, describe those functions for you, how ADHD is related to it, what's the real impairment of these disorders, and then try to put it all together. Because in reality, there's not such a thing as a dyslexic child. There's not such a thing as an ADHD child. The children that have dyslexia and have ADHD and God knows what else, and it's all mixed in, and you can't separate them. So these diagnoses are conceptualizations. So let's define executive function. We said top-down process, and it's top-down for many reasons. Many of you may have heard about the idea of executive functions being like the orchestra conductor or the chief executive officer of a company. And what that relates to basically is the fact that this individual is not doing the job. The conductor is not playing the musical instruments. The executive CEO is not doing the actual work, but it's coordinating that work. Really, executive functions deals with how we work, how we think. It's not an it, it's a process. It's a combination of multiple different processes. For those of you who have been in the field for a while, we used to talk about study habits and organizational skills, but that's really what it is, work habits. when I used to run the Child Development Center at a hospital, and they had a seminar for time management for busy physicians. And I said, oh, I need to go to that. And I went in, and you wouldn't believe this. It was a 4th grade lesson plan on how to write. They had the little web in the middle, and you have your main idea and your committees coming, and I'm going like, what the heck? The 4th grade teacher did this. How much do you pay this person to do that? Because it's what you teach your kids there. So this is new jargon for things that we have been doing for a long time. 23 years ago, Sister Gilly and I worked on a project where we had 36 schools on the southwest coast of Florida. And she and her team developed these wonderful strategies that you will hear about later on how to implement some of these social skills and time management and study skills at a school-wide level. And we just called them strategies. Now they're executive function strategies. So, whatever it is. But what we see in this definition is it starts at the top, and it starts at the top anatomically too. Because, executive functions come from the front of the brain, which is the newest part of the brain. So we consider this the top, and it goes all the way down, okay? What it does is facilitates decision making. And it does this in the working memory. And working memory is like the RAM of your brain. It's what allows you to hold information temporarily manipulated, integrate knowledge, and then make a decision about what you're going to do. And that decision needs to be based in the context in which we're looking at the problem. So for now, what is the best decision? Okay? So it's a collection of different functions that affect how we think and how we learn. And these are some of the things that executive function does. Okay, goal setting, making plans, keeping track of more than one thing at a time, multitasking, finishing work on time. I mean, how many of your students, how many of your children, take hours and hours to complete simple work? Ask for help when they need it. A lot of my patients say, well, why didn't you finish the work? Well, I didn't know how to do it. But did you ask the teacher? No. Why? I don't know. She just. But it also has a dramatic impact on behavior. It impacts social skills. Think about it. We tend to think about executive functions as it relates to work. But how about being in middle school and trying to figure out how to fit it into a conversation? And how to think about what did that person mean by that? All of these complex things that have to be processed with, processing gestures, tone of voice, body language, all at once while you're trying to be cool, So that is very important. Again, it's a combination of different processes, different functions. And the goal is that it allows you to be independent. And if you think about this, when you look at what are the developmental demands that school places on a student, when are those independent skills are taxed the most? Because at that point is when you're going to begin to see the biggest problem with executive function. And then it escalates. It has to be purposeful. Why are you doing this? What is the goal? What do I want to attain? And it's contextual. I need feedback. How is this working out? Is this working well enough or not? How often do you see your students or your children doing the same thing over and over again in spite of having the same outcome? How is that working for you? Not very well. Why do you keep doing it? So that's what happens. And in the end, just like any other skill that we have, it has to be fluent. It has to happen automatically. Because if I spend too much time thinking about how I'm thinking, I'm not focusing on what I'm thinking about. Okay? So we have two strands on executive function. One that is intended for work, and one that is intended for behavioral regulation. And that is important to understand. We have to not only work with these skills, but regulate our behavior and our emotions. And that has a dramatic impact on how we operate. So as we think about it, they actually have a different location in the brain from the way that we look at it, okay? When we hear the word metacognition, metacognitive skills, metalinguistic skills is one of the components of language. It really has to do with how we think about how we think about how we work, how we think about how we communicate. Okay, so when you hear the word meta, it means that overview, that mountain look down into the valley where you can see the whole picture and analyze how everything is working effectively. Okay, so how do children develop executive functions? Well, we see that white matter begins to develop over time, and those connections will be establishing the patterns. It requires sensory input, okay? And then we have to put it in memory, which is the storage, and the processing. So all of this will happen within the context of a particular situation. So what happens when I go in and I, misbehave in a particular situation? I get in trouble, So through experimentation, I learned that that's not a good idea, okay? So that's what we look for. We look at development, experimentation, but also the cues that the adults will use. And what that does is establishes brain connections that allow us to really automatize those processes. The white matter in the brain increases the conduction of the nerve impulses. So when we look at the child growing up, we have the two functions, experimentation. So if I do this and it works out for me, everybody said I did a good job, this is pretty good. But also from the adult, the external cues, the external structure. Last night we were having a conversation. We talked about, I said, how often when you're to them, you work, listen to your words. Is your parents talking through you and your grandparents too? It's like you're possessed, And what happens in the end is that that's how you regulate developmental behavior. So the environment plays a major role. Yes, there are some children that when they were giving executive functions, they were not standing on that line, okay? So genetic predisposition plays a major role, okay? But the environment really affects it, and that is important. And if you think about it, okay, you may have, let's say that your genetic makeup is like a channel that you have, and you're going to put a marble in that channel. And what the environment does, it can tilt that channel at any time, one way or another. And depending on when you tilt that channel and how much, that will determine where that marble will end, even though that channel is the same and the marble is the same. So what happens is environmental impact on brain development is critical. So where children grow, how structured is that environment? How organized is that environment? It's fabulous. Before I came here, I got in my office this beautiful, wonderful schedule. Okay, so teacher doesn't need help with executive functions because boy, I knew who was going to pick me up, what the cell phones were, know where we were going to go out to dinner, we were going to be here. That level of structure is wonderful. It laid out a plan for me. It laid out a picture of what my time was going to be here, and that is wonderful. Okay, so again, looking from the top of the mountain, gives a big picture perspective. Why is it that the generals are not in the middle of the battlefield? Because they're coordinating the battle. They all of a sudden see that there's an attack from the flank. I need to move my troops over there. I need to see this happening. So my executive functions are going to oversee the whole operations, and it has to be flexible. I laid out a plan, and guess what? The enemy decided to come the other way. So how do I change what I have? That flexibility has to be there. Okay? It allows me to integrate what I see with what I know and put it together. That's why context matters. Okay, so if I'm in, Mrs. Jones' class and I have to write a book report on literature, it's going to be different than in Mrs. Peters' class for science, where the format is going to be different, or for my history teacher. So I'm going to be writing a few different types of papers because that's what the demands are going to be. When we look at the elements of executive functions, and I always found this very, very difficult, because we talk about attention, planning, organization, initiation, monitoring, inhibition, problem solving, all of that stuff. You know what? You can define one of those elements with another. They're all interrelated. It's like, this is crazy. I mean, wait till we talk about working memory and attention, and you see what happens there. But what we're going to focus here is going to be on attention, inhibition, working memory, and shift. Those are very critical factors, because if you don't pay attention, nothing is going to happen. If you cannot be flexible, you're not going to have different outcomes. And in the end, some of your children, like your children with an autism spectrum disorder, they have stereotypical thinking. They are not flexible. So they drive a train, not a car. And if you want to change tracks without a switch, there's only one potential outcome, and that's derailment. So we need to be very careful with how we look at these functions, and that's why they have such an impairment. You may be brilliant, but if you're inflexible, we're going to have a huge problem. Okay? So let's talk about attention. We often talk about inattention. And I hear this all the time. How can my kid have an attention deficit disorder? You should see this kid play computer games. You should see this kid doing something that he or she likes. See, the problem with inattention is not that the child or the adult has no ability to pay attention, because they do. Trust me, when your kid is not listening to you, he or she is listening to something else. Okay? The problem is that they're not paying attention to the right thing at the right time for as long as they need to, as in depth as they need to. So that is a huge problem. What we're talking about is the control and regulation of the function of attention, not the presence or the absence of attention. So if I'm paying attention to something, that has to be the right thing. Am I listening to the teacher when the teacher is giving instructions, or am I listening to my buddy that's making plans for the weekend? Am I looking out the window, or am I looking at what the teacher is writing on the board? At the right time, am I listening to the teacher when the teacher is giving instructions, or when the teacher is talking to a colleague in the hallway? So I know what happened last night, or I know what question this guy had over here, and what the answer was, but I don't know what the instructions were, because I was not listening to the teacher when the instructions were given. Am I listening long enough? Am I staying on task? Did I listen to the beginning, the middle, and the end? What do you mean there was a second page? Yeah, everybody else got it. As in depth as you need to. The math sheet came over, the first 3 problems were addition. This is a cinch. I added everything else. Guess what? 50% of the problems were subtraction. You got an F. Oh, yeah, that's a minus there, too late. So these are the things that happen. That's what inattention is all about. Control and regulation of the function of attention, not the presence or the absence of attention. And when you think about inhibition, can I lock away things that are not important? Okay? I had this patient that we put on medication and it says, well, how are you doing in school? I'm doing very well. So do you have any problems with the medication? And he goes, yeah, I don't like it. I said, why is that? Because before I took that medicine, I used to take these wonderful brain trips and I don't take them anymore. He used to sit there and daydream all day long. And he was having a ball, but he had no idea what the heck was going on in the classroom. So, and that requires inhibition, which we will talk about in a second. In order to pay attention, the first thing that has to happen is you have to be awake. Okay, so if you didn't sleep last night, you're not going to be able to focus on what's going on. Then we need to have focal activation, selectivity. What am I paying attention to? Freedom from distractibility, blocking away things that are not important, sustaining attention, effort over time. It's that endurance that is a problem. How often do you hear your students or your children telling you, I read the paragraph and all of a sudden I realized that I was thinking about something else and I had to go back and reread it again and again and again. Now granted, we all do this. ADHD symptoms are not abnormal. Okay, inattention problems are not abnormal. We all have them. The same way that we all have felt sadness, we all have felt nervous and anxiety, but that doesn't mean that we have a disorder because it doesn't impact our quality of life on a day-to-day basis. There's no functional impairment associated with that. So yeah, I get upset every once in a while. Ask my wife when I'm watching TV, see if I'm listening, I just nod. And then she goes, you didn't hear a word I said, did you? So again, altering attention, shifting focus. Now there we go. Elements of attention are defined by another element of executive function. We have to have inhibition in order to sustain attention over time, and we have to be flexible in our thinking to shift focus of attention. Why? Because sometimes we have to. Okay, I'm doing this, but if there's something happening here that requires my immediate attention, I need to be flexible enough. Steps are going to happen because I didn't stop to think about the consequences of my actions, or to formulate a plan for problem solving, or to look at where I want to go. What do I need to do to go there? Goal setting, okay? Another thing that we do with executive function. Really, inhibition is the space between thought and action, and that space is called reflection. An impulsive person is not reflective. Working memory. I do what my kids do when you give them a problem. They went to the internet and looked at different definitions, okay? And what it came out was that it was pretty straightforward. What are the commonalities to all of these definitions? Working memory is an intermediate memory. Intermediate duration implies a few seconds, okay? In what we do is we hold information in that area, in that memory, and then we manipulate it, we manage it, we think. All of those things define we're doing something with that information. And it affects what we do. It affects our learning, our reasoning, our thinking, our comprehension. And it has to happen in context. So It's a very, very, very complex process. Look at another definition of working memory. It's the executive and attentional aspect of short-term memory. Again, here we go, using the same words to define processes that are involved in executive function. So what we do is for a short period of time, we integrate process. Processing means manipulate. I gotta convert this into something different and set up a decision. It requires that the information be processed simultaneously. So if I'm gonna have simultaneous processing of information, I have to have enough capacity to hold all of the data that I need to make those decisions. So in working memory, size matters. Okay, so when you look at the results of a WISC, for example, and you look at working memory, or in the Woodcock-Johnson, that the new edition of the Woodcock-Johnson is nice because it breaks between visual and auditory working memory and all that stuff. Size matters. You have a kid that may have an IQ of 136, but his or her working memory is in the 80s. We have a huge problem. Because you see, when I process information simultaneously, all of the data goes in, so I can manipulate all of that, process it, make a decision. But if my capacity is small, I cannot process the information simultaneously. I gotta process it sequentially. What is one of the most common strategies that you use as a parent or as a teacher when you're giving instructions to children that have attention problems, language problems, or memory problems? You chunk it, you break it down. You know what you do? You tell them one thing at a time. The problem is that if I have to process a lot of information simultaneously to make the proper decision, if it's coming one at a time, it's a problem. So in that process, what may happen is that I got some of it there, I lost some of it in the process. So when you're reading, you may forget some things because you couldn't hold all of that information in there. Why couldn't you hold it? Because I got to that word that I didn't recognize and I had to sound it out, and then I lost half of it because the capacity of my working memory was overwhelmed by the mechanics of reading, not by focusing on content. This is a little diagram of the components of working memory. So we have a phonological loop. That means there's a language component. We have a visual, spatial sketch pad. There's a visual component. Then we have something that's called the episodic buffer. That is sort of like what plays a little movie of it. So for those of you who do Linda Moonbell, the visualizing and verbalizing, they use a lot of the episodic buffer there to put to the story. And then all of that is controlled by the central executive. Okay, so this one element, one component of executive functions has all of these subcomponents in there. And when you look at, phonological loop, we got to remember speech sounds in sequence. When do we use that? When we're decoding, you got to remember the sequence of those sounds. It converts visually presented information into language, so I can label something, so I can recognize the letter, put the sounds together. And then the articulatory rehearsal sort of loops it up and rehearses it. When you're calling a phone number, remember when cell phones first came out and you would call directory assistants and they would give you a phone number, you would be saying it, and then hopefully you will not lose it while you're dialing. Okay, that's working memory, because you have to hold the number in the proper sequence and then set up a motor function, which is dialing the number and not lose that information that you're holding there. It's very temporary. Once you're done, what was that number again? Who the heck cares? I dialed it, I'm there, So it's gone. It's not there anymore. So that's what working memory is all about. So this is just the language part of it. Then we have the visual spatial sketch pad. Shape, color, and texture. Think about B, D, P, Q, 6, 9. It's a stick and a circle, a line and a circle, and depending on where it goes or whether you have a little bit more of a curve or not, it could be. So it's very difficult. And then location. Where does it go? And it has to be done in a very fast way. So we have a sequential component to it and a location, orientation. So when you think about writing, you have to not only put the letters in the right sequence, but you have to space them accordingly. And you have to be able to put them in the right orientation. Then the episodic buffer, what it does, it brings all of these domains together. So it links what we see with what we hear, with what we feel, and then it's sort of, again, the memory of a story or a movie scene, that visualizing. And it links long-term memory and semantic meaning. And that's important. When you read a word, you're thinking about the meaning of the word, that semantic meaning. And that's what's important. By the way, that's what allows your brain to recognize it as a word, is that sequence of abstract symbols have a meaning. The same way that if I pull out, if I pull out my pen, you look at it and you know that this object has a meaning. It has a word, it has applications, functions, all of that. So that's really how all of this works. Then we have the central executive. And you may have seen in the previous slide that all of the other systems are called slave systems to the central executive. And that's because this is, again, it's like a mini executive function just to run working memory, okay? So this is a department of that corporation, and this is the administrator of that particular division of the corporation. It's not the CEO, but it's there. And look at this, shifting, again, flexibility between tasks or retrieval strategies. I go here, but I gotta go there, how do I do this? And requires selective attention and inhibition. So once again, we're defining one element of executive function that incorporates 3 other elements of executive functions. And that's why that is so difficult to understand. All of these elements, all of these processes are like the ingredients in a recipe, and they're all mixed in together, and the recipe is the component of all of those. And once you mix them up, you can separate them. And that's what makes us work the way that we work. When we look at the first important thing, and this is from the children memory scale, they have a wonderful analogy. Memory is like a jar, and the opening of the jar is attention. So that retrieval fluency is critical for automaticity, okay? Because if I have there and I say, okay, what letter is that? Oh, I have it there. I know, airplane begins with that, and apple begins with that. What's the name of the letter? What's the sound of the letter? That is retrieval fluency. It has to be very, very fast. Again, those of you who do evaluations, when you look at long-term retrieval from the Woodcock-Johnson, the retrieval fluency, in as many animals as you can in 30 seconds, in as many countries as you can in 30 seconds. When you look at the CTOP, the rapid automated naming of digits, of objects, of colors, and all of that is very important, because that's what leads to fluency. And remember, context matters. That's why retrieval fluency is so important, because within the context of this situation and my previous experiences, how do I use that to make these decisions now? Shift the cognitive flexibility. Doing things in another way. My favorite story about cognitive inflexibility is with a patient that I had in my office very bright kid, had an autism spectrum disorder. And the parents said, this is so strange, you know, we took his grandmother to the airport last night, because she was going to wherever. They have the snowbirds in Florida, so it was going back home. And when grandma's in town, every Tuesday, we have dinner at grandma's. Okay, so we took grandma to the airport on Monday, and on Tuesday he goes, well, aren't you going to grandma's house? No, we took her to the airport yesterday, but it's Tuesday, and on Tuesdays we have dinner at grandma's house. But she ain't here, you know? But it's Tuesday, and on Tuesdays we have dinner at grandma's house. She is not here, we took her to the, but it's Tuesday. And, you know, so the problem is that I don't have that cognitive flexibility to do that. You know, we talk in the autism spectrum disorders, language impact, the over-focusing on a particular topic. I had this patient that loved to talk about the Titanic. So one day, the nicest kid you can imagine, never had outbursts or anything until the day that I told him, you know, I don't want to talk about the Titanic. I want to talk about baseball. He goes, but I want to talk about the Titanic. And I said, I know, but we always talk about the Titanic. How about if we compromise and talk about baseball first and then the Titanic? No, but I want to talk about the Titanic. And people really very angry with me. There's no cognitive flexibility. Not only there's no cognitive flexibility, but also there's no reciprocity in that interaction there. So the language, all of the pragmatic language skills were out the window because he couldn't care less about what I was thinking and what I had to say. All that he cared about was what he was going to talk about. So that's when you look at the inflexibility of thinking, the stereotypical thinking. And then you think about the lack of understanding of someone else's perspective. The inability to understand that I am not thinking what he's thinking, that I don't like what he likes, and that I am not here to listen to the things that he wants to talk about, but I am here to give feedback and have some reciprocity. So the neurology, I always show pictures of the brain. It makes people think that I'm smart and that I know a lot, but just pretty pictures of the brain. As I told you before, we have, you know, a top-down. So if this is the brain and we're looking at it, the nose is here, this is the frontal lobe. And in the frontal lobe, we have two components, the orbital prefrontal cortex, and it's called the orbital prefrontal cortex because the eye is here, so we call the eye the orbit, okay? And then we have the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And what we know is that the dorsolateral affects work. And these are all of the things that we talked about before, okay? And the orbital controls behavior. So in the 50s, when they used to do frontal lobotomies, because people used to have this poor behavioral regulation, what they did was they went in and they literally either removed or damaged that part of the brain. But executive function was done at that time, so they may not be hit, but they may not be able to multitask and do a lot of different things. Okay? So what happens is, and this is very important when you think about learning. See, the frontal lobe determines output. All of the other lobes in the brain, temporal, parietal, occipital, they process input. And the input into the brain comes through the senses. Of the 5 senses, we use 3 for book learning. Vision, hearing, and the sense of touch and position. Smell and taste don't help you too much for book learning. Okay? So we have 3 separate locations for those lobes. How many of you have heard the term multisensory instruction? You know? Exactly. Why do we auditory, visual, and tactile kinesthetic? That's where it comes. And that's what those areas do. So this input comes into the frontal lobe, and from the frontal lobe, the actions are determined. And then they're going to be modulated by the cerebellum and the basal ganglia and all that stuff. And then what happens is those more primitive brain centers, and the primitive brain centers, what people used to refer to as the reptilian brain, you know? Those are more, let me show you, oops, here, there. Those are here, deep into the brain, down, okay? Into the brain. So the top is on the outside, and the bottom is closer to the middle, okay? So that's top down, front to back, and we see that, you know, reticular activating system deals with alertness, first component of attention. We have to be alert, we have to be awake to pay attention. Cerebellum regulates smoothness of movement, you know? It regulates balance. When all of a sudden you are on an uneven surface, or you're in a bowl, it's probably what do. You widen your base, okay? Watch a baby walk. They have what we call a cerebellar gait. When the kids start to walk, they walk with their feet wide apart and a high guard to protect themselves, okay? All of those things. The coordination of voluntary movement. Do I have abnormalities in my movement? And again, the amygdala, the fight or flight response, okay? Emotional memory. That's where PTSD, that's where anxiety disorders reside, okay? And all of these things modulate our response to executive function. So our emotions will play a dramatic role on how we think and how we regulate that thinking, okay? So I'm going to have here, this is a great example of executive function in action here, okay? I lost it there. There we go. That's it. Let me see if I can get, there we go. So all of you probably remember this, but some of you may be too young to remember this. But think about this here. We have Lucy and Ethel and the chocolate factory. Now we're getting to the third grade. Those high competency exams are coming along. And they're basically saying this is a losing battle. So that's what automaticity of a skill means. They were overwhelmed by lack of automaticity. This didn't happen without it, and the volume was too high. Then they got nervous, so they strategized. Okay, so let's look at the things that we're more familiar with. How am I doing with time? How much do I have? 45 minutes, perfect. Okay, so ADHD. When we talk about ADHD, I think that it's important to understand that not everything that glitters is gold. We do have criteria. Having symptoms is not sufficient. You have to have impairment. okay? So in order to do that, first thing, you have to have symptoms before the age of 12 years. So if you develop ADHD in high school or college, it ain't that. You're drinking too much, you're stoned all the time, or you're not sleeping enough, which is probably a combination of all of those, okay? Oh, but I took my roommate's Adderall and I could really focus. No kidding. A response to medication and diagnosis does not make, okay? If all of us here would take a stimulant medication before you came in, I would have the most attentive audience in the world. You know, in spite of the fact that it's a beautiful day outside and you're going, what am I doing here? Should be out there, hanging out, having a good time, you know? The second thing, impairment has to occur in 2 or more settings. So now that is an issue. If I have problems in only one setting, it may be something else. The symptoms have to last for more than 6 months, and they cannot be the result of another problem. For example, anxiety can give me terrible attention problems. But the root of the attention problems is that I'm so stressed out that I can only think about what I'm stressed out about, so I'm not paying attention to anything else. That's not ADHD. And if I give you a stimulant, I may have to pull you off the ceiling for that, you know? So these are the symptoms of inattention. And if you have 6 or more symptoms of inattention, you're cool. You go to DSM, you can get them there, and they're all there. These are, we talked about this. We talk about the inability to pay attention to the right thing at the right time for as long as you need to, as in depth as you need. Impulsivity and hyperactivity. Here are the symptoms. Okay? Impulsivity, the inability to stop and think about the consequences of your actions, to stop and formulate a plan, to think about previous experiences or rules. How many times do I have to tell you? You know? To wait for the question to be finished. They're blurting an answer. They're not waiting to be called. In hyperactivity, okay? If you're hyperactive, you can be overactive, fidgety, and talkative. Motor feet, motor butt, motor mouth. Okay? It's just how it goes, and it's very easy to diagnose. So the important thing is, how does this present? Diagnostically speaking, they are all called an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Don't ask me why, it's just the way that it is. It used to be minimal brain damage, then CAT scans came about and they said there's no damage, so it's the way that it works, so it's minimal brain dysfunction. Then we said, well, the primary symptoms are hyperactivity, so we have the hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. Then he said, well, there's attention problems and things like that. Then there was ADD, and there was ADD-H with hyperactivity, ADD no H without hyperactivity. And someone said, you know what? We have been talking about these people from 6 to 12, but the reality of it is that it doesn't stop at 12, so maybe we have ADD-R for residual. And then in the 80s, it became attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then we had combined presentation, or combined type, inattentive type, and hyperactive impulsive type. And now it's called an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, predominantly combined presentation, predominant hyperactive impulsive presentation, and predominant inattentive presentation. And the combined presentation is the most common, the inattentive is the second most common, and the hyperactive impulsive is the rarest. And it can be mild, moderate, or severe, so you have a little bit of a problem, a social problem, or a heck of a problem. And, you know, that's about how that's determined, okay? So the impairment, this is the key. If you have an attention problem, where's the impairment? And it's important to understand that, yes, we look at the symptoms, but it's the functional impairment that defines a disorder. We are all inattentive, we are all impulsive, and we can all get hyperactive, but it does not affect how we work, how we relate to people, or our health. So, as I look at the impairment of ADHD, what is the problem that we see with work? And the child's work is school. But in adults, it's the same thing. Decreased production and accuracy. You get less work done in the same amount of time, and you make more careless mistakes. Think about it. You start doing your work over here, and it's like, oh, look at that. I got a pointer here's the cat, and I'm here, and I stopped working. Or I listened to the instructions and I only did half of it, or I forgot to check the second page, so I added everything, so I do less work than other people, and I make careless mistakes because I'm not paying attention to it, or I didn't stop to think, so I didn't formulate a plan. I started working on the project, and I said, ooh, I want to do this. I like to have a pretty picture, so I started drawing a picture, and then I go, oh, the teacher said something about bibliography, so then I go to the bibliography, then I go to, oh, the front page should have, and I'm all over creation, and I have gone to China and back just to get the first page of the report done, and then in the process, I'm getting up because I got to sharpen my pencil, and then I saw something over here that got me sidetracked, and I'm doing this, that, and the other, and nothing is getting done, And so we have a problem with that. Behaviorally, what we see is that they're disruptive and non-compliant. Okay, they're disruptive because they talk too much, they interrupt, they can't keep their hands to themselves, they run rather than walk, etc. They're non-compliant because they don't listen and they do things without thinking. Okay? So there's a difference between non-compliance and defiance. Non-compliance is, okay, Eric, go get dressed. Not a problem. But between the kitchen and the bedroom, the hallway got in the way. What was supposed to be the channel that got you there is just like I did. Then I opened my underwear drawer and I was transported into a different dimension of the universe. Once again, every single morning you do this, And I sat down to put my socks on, and then I found a toy and I'm under the bed right now doing this and the other. And if I'm standing there and tell you, don't do that, do this, don't do that, go here, go, and then do it. Okay? So what we don't have here is defiance. This child had every intention of doing what was asked of him. The problem was that life got in the way. Okay? But nevertheless, this child still did not do what he was told to do when he was told to do it. And by the way, that's how we define compliance. Doing what you were told when you were told, which is within 5 to 8 seconds of a command. In the end, you didn't do what you were told to do. And while it may not be your fault, it is your problem. And your job is to manage your problem. So I need to get this done. I need for you to finish your work on time and to do your work correctly. I need for you to be less disruptive and more compliant. And I need for you to be more socially aware and less intrusive. I know that this is not your fault, but it is your problem. And if you know that something will help it, you have a responsibility to do something about it. Because other people should not have to put up with that. And that is very important. Okay? This is impairment over a lifetime, from academic limitations, problems with relationships that lead to low self-esteem. Oh, I want my kid to have good self-esteem. Confidence comes from competence. Then let's teach them how to be competent. Let's teach them how to be good readers. Let's teach them how to be compliant so that people are not yelling at them all the time. Let's teach them how to have appropriate social skills so that they're not driving people crazy. They don't want to be around them. That's our responsibility, and they need to implement those strategies. That's very difficult to do. So, dyslexia. Well, we know that it's a learning disorder. It's neurobiological in origin. It's because the brain is not working appropriately. And it leads to very specific problems, decoding and spelling. Well, if you can sound out a word, you cannot spell it. Encoding is the opposite of decoding. And in English, that is a huge problem. It also causes difficulties with rapid and accurate word recognition. Okay, they're not fluent. And if they are not fluent, we have a problem. Because fluency, the automaticity of the skill, is what's going to allow you to be a strategic reader. The problem is not due because they're too young. The problem is not due because they're not smart. And the problem is not due because they were not taught. They're taught like everybody else, but they're not reading like everybody else. And they're smart, but you didn't tell them. So it happens because there's problems with phonological processing. The most basic element of every language is its sounds. The study of the sounds of a language is called phonology. And phonological processing or phonological awareness is our capacity to manipulate the sounds within the word. Again, it's unexpected for the reasons that I talked about before. And if you can't read, guess what? You're not going to understand what you're reading. Duh, you know? So that's how we develop vocabulary. So how is it that the brain allows us to read? Reading is not a normal biological process. But what the brain does, it's pretty neat. The brain can differentiate speech from noise because it recognizes that words have a meaning, number one, and number two, that words are made out of sounds. So if I say cat, the word knows immediately the image of the cat comes up, but it also knows that that is the word because there's three sounds associated with it. Now, if you were focusing on the sounds, you would overwhelm the working memory in the brain. So you focus on the overall thing, but that's what allows it to differentiate it, because if I do this, and I say cat, I'm going to process those sounds into different parts of the brain. Another thing is that the brain will focus on meaning all the time. So if you see something, it's going to focus also on the meaning of it. But to expedite things, that's what happens. So if I listen to the word books, because, oh, books, perfect. When I start reading, I see cat, and I go, oh, that's cat, and blend it. Now, this okay, so this is another this is another look of the brain, and as you can see, Dyslexics are going to use a different part of the brain to process what they're seeing and try to attach meaning to it. So when we're trying to decode, we process the sounds within the words, and that leads to that. And the idea is that this will become a fluent or automatic process. And in order to make it a fluent or automatic process, I will look at the word cat. Rather than sounding it out, it will go straight to meaning. Okay? Perfect. Okay, thank you. So, again, we want it to be that fast because fluency is what's going to allow us to perform. Okay? If you were to look at a formula for reading, there's going to be three components: decoding, fluency, and comprehension. You're born with comprehension, you're taught decoding, and you practice fluency. And that is a key factor. Reading is not a normal biological process. It has to be taught. So if between 5 to 10% of the population would meet the definition of dyslexia, those are the kids that you're really going to have an awful time trying to get them to blend, trying to get them to recognize the sounds within the words, trying to get better recognition. And later on, you're going to have a difficult time getting them to be fluent, to look at a word and know what the word is. And the problem with phonemic awareness, especially in English, is that English is a phonologically deep language. That means that it has many, many sounds. Depending on who you read, 44 sounds up to 52. And it's considered an orthographically opaque language. You don't write the way that you speak. Okay, as you may notice, I have a little bit of an accent. But as I tell my kids, I don't have an accent to do because you can talk like me. But anyway, it's a matter of perspective. Think of the sound of the letter F. It could be one F, two for good measure. I don't know, you want to spare one. PH, if it is a scientific word, or UGH. And those Anglo-Saxon words are really very bad, except that it could be rough, or it could be though. Now you tell me why, okay? And I have many friends, as you've heard, in IPA, there's many researchers and scientists, and it's period. This, K or seek the person, S-E-E, come on, get real, So in Spanish is only one, and it works very well. Grammar in Spanish, on the other hand, is God-forsaken, it's terrible. In English is much easier, so you gotta pay the price somewhere, but. Okay, so again, if you think about it, you hear a sound, you're gonna focus on it. You have a representation of that sound that is anatomic. What was the sound? Ah. Okay. Visual. I had my mouth open. Kinesthetic. Ah. Okay. So it's voiced. So speech language pathologist, and you hear voice and all of that, So that's there. Okay. Phoneme representation. Then working memory, and of course, rapid automatic naming, because that's what's going to determine your fluency. And then at that point, I have decoded. I got to the top of the pyramid. That's a huge process. Again, if this doesn't take place here, I'm going to run into trouble here. And if I run into trouble here, I don't get the meaning. Okay, that's why when you do a test, you look at the KT, or you look at the WIAD or the Woodcock. You're going to compare listening comprehension with reading comprehension. Because if your listening comprehension is good, depending on how they tap short-term memory, because your kids with ADHD may not recall some of the stuff, and they do poorly in listening comprehension too, because they're not paying attention. But if you have good listening comprehension and poor reading comprehension, what does that tell you? The problem is with reading, because you can understand what you hear. If you can say it, but you can't write it, then the problem is with writing. It's the same thing. It makes sense. So that C, that comprehension, that language component is okay. If you have a language disorder, then you're going to have a problem with comprehension too. And you may be an excellent reader, but you may not understand what you read. Your hyperlexics are that way. They have fantastic decoding abilities. But don't ask them a question about interpretation of what they read, because they can't give it to you. So when we talk about dyslexia, we're talking about those individuals who cannot read but have good comprehension. Many of you are familiarized with Gilchrist wrote, and what that tells you is it's very important. Word recognition is the mechanics of reading. Language comprehension is really the executive component of it. And we go from becoming, a technical reader to a strategic reader. So you see here that we have to have increased automaticity of our mechanics of reading. At the same time, we're becoming an increased strategic reader. And that's the reading comprehension strategies. And that is critical. Okay, so in order for you to be a good reader, you have to have fluent execution. Fluent means automatic. Automatic means you do it without thinking. And if you do it without thinking, you're not using working memory space in the mechanics of it, only in the comprehension strategies. So that's why we need to make those functions so automatic. If you look at this slide, you hear that children acquire most of their vocabulary from the 5th grade on through reading. The reader in the 10th percentile reads about 51,000 words per year. A reader in the 50th percentile, which is here, reads about 600,000 words per year. A reader in the 90th percentile reads 2.3 million words per year. And this is in the top 10% of the population, this is in the bottom 10% of the population. If you were in the 50th percentile, which by the way is one standard deviation below the mean, and the 85th would be one standard deviation above, and that's still considered the broad average range. It's not it. When you look at the National Assessment for Educational Readiness, when you look at the reading assessment, what's considered basic reading is the 34th percentile. That's a standard score of 94 or so. It's not a 90, which is still within the broad average range. And to read at a basic level, you can read a menu, you can read a simple story. Okay? So the clinical impact we all know for spelling, for comprehension, for vocabulary development, and increasing dropout rates. Prisons have an 80% incidence of illiteracy in some of the studies, between 50 to 80%. It's huge. The public health impact is tremendous. So, just going back here again, remember, this is the area of the brain that processes sounds, in the area of the brain that processes the words. The dyslexic person does not have, and this is a study that was done in adults. And what we have here is, if you see, this is left brain, this is right brain. On the red circles here, you don't see much red color in there. You see more on this side. After 6 weeks of intense intervention on decoding skills, not on fluency, decoding skills, look at the change, and again, 8 adults, look at the change in left brain functioning, look at the change in right brain functioning. Less red, more red. here, the dyslexia, look at the difference. You know what that tells you? The treatment for dyslexia is instruction. You are the people responsible for managing these problems. It's not that the child is not, it's evidence-based instruction. That's what will take care of this problem. And what a gift to give someone. Now, as you know, decoding skills you have to do very intensively, very slowly. Fluency skills are done more with repetitive, directed practice, because you gotta oversee it to make sure that you don't reinforce the same mistakes all the time. Okay, so remember when I first started, I told you that we can't look at these kids as a dyslexic kid or ADHD kid or whatever. We're looking at them as an individual. And when we were working on a project that I told you at the beginning with Sister Gilchrist 20-some years ago, we came up with this concept. And the concept was based more on functional impairment than anything else. We don't focus on the symptoms, we focus on the impairment. And the impairment is defined in 4 ways: work behavior, social relationships, and health. So if you ain't doing badly in school, you ain't driving your parents or teachers crazy, if you have at least one friend and you ain't sick, life ain't bad. Anything that you get above that is free. Anything below that, you got a problem. What we call it is not important unless you're looking for services or you want to read about it. The label will buy you services. That's the way that the system works. You get what you qualify for, which may not be what you need. And you may not get what you need, even though you have a problem, okay? So that is a very important concept. There are 4 major contributing factors to functional impairment: your developmental profile, your behavioral emotional profile, health factors, and the environment. It is the combination of these 4 factors that together cause impairment. You give me a good description of what's going on here, and I'll give you a good prescription to manage it. And there's only 4 things that can be done. You can intervene educationally, psychologically, medically, and environmentally. That's the only thing that you can do, okay? So, how do I know that what I'm doing is working? My benefit of that. Have you increased production and accuracy? Have you decreased disruptive disorder behavior in improved compliance? Have you increased social awareness? Have you limited the health factors associated with ADHD? Have you improved decoding and fluency? Have you improved spelling and written expression? Because if you haven't, you may have been doing wonderful therapy, but it didn't do what it was supposed to do, which is eliminate the impairment. You know, are you better off today than what you were 3 months ago? Okay, let's stay the course. And then we can try to tweak it, but don't do things just because, oh, I heard that this was the latest thing, you know, let's do it. The factors that affect you. If you think of the brain as a factory where you're going to bring raw materials into it, you're going to have 4 checkpoints: mental age, attention, processing speed, and whether the task is sequential or simultaneous. Okay? If you have the mental age of a 3-year-old and I'm giving you 6-year-old work, it's not going to go in, period. You just can't. Again, remember the job, okay? This is the opening of the job right here, attention. If I'm moving things around, it's not going to work very well. I may have a 12-lane highway, I may have an IQ of 133, but if my processing speed is slow, I'm not gonna work fast. And again, many students and many adults equate speed with intelligence. No. I have very bright patients that work really slowly because they have a slow processing speed. We have the input. The input is sensory in nature, so we have visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic. Okay? Translating that into meaningful information is processing. Where does processing take place? Working memory. So from there, we have to do automatic retrieval and all of that. We have the central executive coordinating all of that, and the output is oral and written. And all of that stuff comes out through the same avenue that it came in. And remember, the frontal lobe is responsible for output. This is what's happening in the brain. And we haven't talked about motor control, and we haven't talked about a bunch of other stuff that do play a significant role, okay? Environmental factors, okay? Home, parents' temperament and personality. How big are your buttons for your child to push? That's what that means. And when they push that button, it's gonna drive you nuts. How you react to the way that you feel, it's a lifetime of therapy, maybe medication, a lot of breathing, you know, whatever. Parenting effectiveness. How effective are you in getting your child to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it? Not after a Supreme Court debate or World War III. And stress. What is the level of environmental stress? I tell this to every parent because this is very important. Environmental stress is like cabin decompression in an airplane. And what do the flight attendants tell you? If someone needs your help, when the masks come down, put your mask on first. Why? Because people that cannot breathe cannot help other people breathe. So breathe, okay? Because if a parent burns out, that poor kid is screwed. Nobody else is gonna watch out over that child. So in my practice, my main concern is make sure that the parents are not burned out, because that will be the best thing. So I tell them, take care of the stress at home. Take care of it individually. The cheapest way is exercise. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. You know, it relaxes you, it releases endorphins, it improves your cardiovascular function, so the stress that this kid gives you is not going to kill you sooner rather than later, you know, all of those things. Plus, if all of those things are happening, it means that you're exercising strenuously enough, that you're breathing hard. So talking is hard, so you have half an hour, 40 minutes of peace and quiet. Plus, you're sweating enough that people want to be around you, so it works okay. And if you have a spouse, then nurture the relationship. Because two can do the work of three, but one cannot do the work of two. So go out on a date, it's cheaper than psychotherapy. Take a vacation, it's not a family trip. Family trips are not vacation. Vacation are without children, okay? Because it's too hard to travel with kids. So that's how we look at it, you know? It's the truth. School, this is very important. Look at what's needed, okay? The little kids, you gotta look at the teacher's temperament and personality. You know, I may be God's gift to teachers, but there's certain kids that I may not be able to work with. You know, they may not be able to work with me, and that's okay. Physical facility. Okay, when you hear Sister talk in a few minutes, she'll talk about her school. She has a school for children that have learning and behavioral emotional problems that come from very impoverished environments, okay? So, you know, when you have to take care of students like that, having 25, 30 kids in a classroom will not help you. You know, those kids need a short leash. So, you know, what type of facility do you have? You have 4 walls and doors to contain them, you know, to block away things that are not important, all of that. But above all is we need to know what the curriculum demands are. Because what we do is going to be very important. You know, one of the things that kills me is that many of my patients don't come to the attention of the system until they fail that 3rd grade competency test in reading. And that is a crime for a very simple reason. If you look at the curriculum demands? The only time in your educational career where we're going to focus on skills is kindergarten through the third grade. After the third grade, you're reading to learn, you're not learning to read. You're writing to communicate, not learning to write. And you're applying math computational skills for problem solving. That's why they give you those skills, yes.
Your slides are online.
Oh.
They're online, they don't have practice.
Oh, sister says that my slides are online. So, how are you going to, and then a lot of parents go, the kid is in second grade. Well, in that school, they were doing this in science. Who the heck cares about science if the kid can't read, You're going to have a lifetime to learn about science and social studies and art and literature, but you only have 4 years to learn to read, write, add, subtract, and multiply. We need to have literate individuals so that we can educate them and we can make them independent students. And you know what happens after the 4th grade? We expect you to know how to be an independent student. And that means your executive functions need to be there. The amount of writing doubles. The amount of positive reinforcement diminishes by 60% from the teacher because the expectations are you know what to do. Then you get to middle school, and that 6 teachers a locker when they're hormonally challenged, and you have to figure out how to fit into the social group. And that's when the peer group really begins to have an influence. So all of your kids that had that lighter in their dirty clothes or the one cigarette you found, they were not holding it for somebody else. Trust me, they're theirs. And you have high school, and high school is preparation for the next stage of education, whether that's college or technical school or whatever, trade, it doesn't matter. You need to look at that. Okay, management. Educational management is divided into 2 approaches. We have remediation, which is focusing on the weaknesses. And it should be mediation because we're not reading anything. Remediation, rehabilitation is an adult term. I want to get you back to the level that you were before. But if I never spoke, if I have delayed language, I never had enough competence in language. That's why I am doing the therapy, to help you develop to the maximum of your abilities and minimize the impairment that may be causing. Okay? That's where special education is. When you have a dyslexic student, develop the skills in the classroom and understand the process of learning. Why am I doing this? I'm not torturing you with homework, I'm teaching you how to work independently. Let's focus on the process, okay? And the most important thing of all of it is this. You know what we do in schools? We grade outcome, we don't grade the process. One of the strategies that Sister developed in many of her schools was that in order to get 100% on a test, you had to show your study guide, which we used to call a 3-day memory plan. And if you did that, you got 100%. Otherwise, you got, even if you got all the questions right, you got a 90. Okay, so that was there. Show me the rough draft. Part of the process of the project is, okay, tell me your thing by such and such date. You finish on time, here's 10% of the grade. Give me your bibliography, that's 10% of the grade. Give me your outline, that's 10, and you grade the process. But if you don't grade it, it's not gonna happen. What's gonna happen is the night before the project is due, they tell the parents, oh, I have this project due tomorrow, the parents go in a panic, and you see the project that the parents did the night before. All of the instructional process are the same. I teach it to you, we'll do it together, and then you do it on your own, and that's the repeated practice that leads to automaticity, okay? So initial practice, distributed practice, and then cumulative review. That is very important. Anita Archer has a wonderful book, Explicit Instruction, Effective and Efficient Teaching, and it's a great reference to have. And that is in the slides. When you get the slides, you'll be able to get those there. Medical management, very briefly. Why? Because if you don't manage attention, you cannot have executive function. I'll tell you too, one thing. All the pills in the world will not teach these kids organizational skills. The vast majority of my patients, even though they're paying attention, they still forget to turn in the homework the next day. And that's when murderous thoughts cross my mind. How could you possibly torture your parents for 3 hours and lose your homework in your book bag, And that's what happens. So that repeated practice is very important. In terms of medical management, it's very, very simple. We use medication or surgery. For behavioral problems, there's not much to cut. So mostly, as a physician, all that I can do is prescribe. What they're trying to do is to regulate neurotransmitters. Okay, brain cells communicate with one another by sending these signals that are through chemicals. And what we have to do is we have to increase the amount of the neurotransmitters so that they can activate the receptors. So if you get an electrical stimulus, it will go into the synapse, which is the space between the cells. They go to the receptors, they send an electrical signal, and that's how the message gets transmitted. So if we regulate the release, the receptors, or block the calcium channels, we can then control things. And that's how the medicines work. We have a reluctant pump here that sucks the neurotransmitter back for further reuse. So think of that space between the cells as a basin and a sink. I want to increase the amount of water in that basin, and I can either turn on the faucet or plug the drain to make that go up faster. That's how medicines work. And the thing is that these medicines only manage the symptoms. So it's like taking Advil or Aleve or Tylenol. Okay, when the effect is gone, the symptoms come back. And they're very, very effective. And actually, they're all pretty much very safe. There's two types of medicines that we use to manage ADHD. We have stimulants, and in the stimulants, we have two families. We have the Ritalin family called methylphenidate, and that is a bunch of different medications. Dexmethylphenidate, that's Focalin. We have amphetamine salts. We have dextroamphetamine sulfate, mixed amphetamine salts, and lisdexamphetamine. They basically, Coke and Pepsi, okay, they're very, very similar. One is not better than the other. A lot of parents ask me, which is the best medication? In this day and age, the one that your insurance company will cover with the least amount of trouble, okay? Because trying to get this, it's a nightmare. I've been in practice 33 years and have never seen this happen. Drugstores don't carry it, they don't tell you if one of their other drugstores has it. Go to a neighborhood drugstore, avoid the chains. In the state of Florida, at least Costco, and Target, not anymore because they're going to go to CVS, so, don't go there. It's true. The big ones, Walgreens and CVS, are the worst. So their pharmacists, the head pharmacists, they get bonuses by how much inventory they have left at the end of each month. And then they're not going to have C2 drugs in their inventory. So then you have the non-stimulants, and the main difference between the stimulants and the non-stimulants is that the stimulants are very dramatic, they work very, very fast. They're not subtle medicines. The non-stimulants are very subtle. They last 24 hours, and you have to titrate. Mostly we use them as second-line medications. We have atomoxetine, Strattera, from Eli Lilly here in Indy, and then we have the alpha-2 agonist. The one percent in clonidine that are sold as Intuitive and Cafe. The way that we think about medicine is duration of action. 4, 6 to 8 to 12 hours, or 24 hours. And that's how I determine what I'm going to prescribe. If it works, what do we see? They get more work done in the same amount of time, they make less careless mistakes, they're less disruptive, more compliant, and more socially aware, period. I had this 5th grader that I saw about 2 months ago and said to me, I don't want you to change your medication. And I said, why? And he said, when I came here in the 3rd grade, I was failing most of my classes. My teachers hated me, and I had no friends. He said, I am in the honor roll right now. My teachers love me, and I have 3 girls that like me. So he said, don't touch it, leave it be. Okay? I had another patient, and this is 2 patients out of 33 years, so I mean, the ends are not very big. I had another patient that said to me, that medicine that you gave me is great. What 7-year-old says that? And I said, why on earth would you say that? And he goes, because ever since I started taking that pill, people stopped yelling at me. And it was a statement of fact. And I said, well, why were they yelling at you? Because I didn't listen, you know? And he was not poor me or whatever. That's improvement in quality of life. That is functional impairment taken care of. And that's what we're looking for. So this thing about giving them a break on weekends and holidays, I don't know how many of you remember your grades in elementary school, but I don't. But I remember my friends and how well I got along. We're managing attention problems, not just school problems. If you take the medicine 7 days a week, you're going to develop a tolerance to the side effects a lot faster. So, lack of appetite. Worrying about lack of appetite with stimulant medication is the biggest waste of a worry God put on earth. Because they're all going to gain weight sooner or later. They're all going to grow sooner or later. So you can worry about it if you want to, but medically speaking, for the most part, in the vast majority of the patients, it's really not an issue. So that's how we look at it. One word about controversial therapies. Beware of the word natural. Hemlock is natural. Tobacco is natural. Marijuana is natural. Cholesterol. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to tell you that Dr. Tridas is the immediate past president of the International Dyslexia Association, that's nationwide. He's also a developmental pediatrician, I think he was talking to you about that, specializing in all kinds of things like learning differences, dyslexia, the autism spectrum, intellectual disabilities, and other neurodevelopmental and behavior problems. He's also edited a book called the ABC, What Every Parent Should Know About Dyslexia and Attention Problems. Where can they find that?
I think in the IDA website, you can go to the EIDA.org and under their I don't know where they buy the book.
So if you go to the International Dyslexia Association website, you can find it there. And he's also a clinical professor, associate professor at the University of Southern Florida, Marsoni College of Medicine. Wasn't he amazing?
I just want to encourage you all to really join IDA. It's a wonderful organization. The publications are fantastic. The perspectives are really, the research whittled down to a way that a teacher and a parent that understands the principles can apply them. And the electronic letters are really wonderful. They keep you abreast as to what's going on nationally and through your branch locally. We have 43 national branches, and really this is where the work happens. It's because of the dedication of the people like you that on a beautiful day like today can come here, that kids are doing better in this community. So that would be, it's a great place, it's a great home, professional home for the individuals that are serving these kids, and for the parents who get a tremendous amount of information. And our conference now has a full day dedicated to parents and individuals with dyslexia. So it's really worth it. It's going to be in Dallas this fall in about 3 weeks, and next year it's going to be in Orlando. So I encourage you all to join.
Thank you. I just wanted to update on the READ Act House, the House of Representatives, House Bill 3033. I talked to you earlier about that. It's called the READ Act. So if you would call your congressman and tell them to please co-sponsor. Already Messer and Bouchon have started to are sponsoring that. So if you encourage your representative, it will make all the difference in the world. One phone call. Takes 5 minutes. Thank you. Don't forget to sign up for the door prize if you're interested. It's over there. Yes.
I'm curious, the slides for this presentation, where did it come?
The slides.
The slides.
Okay, if you just put in the words developmental web and Eric Tridas, it'll come up.
In Google.
Right.
Developmental Web, Eric Tridas. And it will come up?
There's a couple websites that have that. And actually, I was looking for the developmental web and all the sites came up.
Okay. Developmental Web, Eric Tridas, and it will come up. We will also, Josh Clemens is videotaping today, and we will have that on our website as soon as it gets edited. Don't forget the door prize, refreshments in the back. If you are presently a member of IDA, will you step forward, please, for literally a 7-minute meeting? Thank you.
I'm not a member. Jeff said to go to Jimmy John's for lunch today because you're going to be a car fast track near the airport. So if you don't mind talking to him and giving me everything like it's
Okay.
She has friends in high school. I have to tell you, I thought that was pretty amazing as I was reading. Trying to find my notes. She's the director of Ave Maria School, where there are students from 6 years old to 22 years old with learning and emotional disorders. She has been very busy, starting the Epiphany Community Religious Order, founded 3 special ed schools, including Ave Maria. And she created Dream for Free education model used in 16 states and with 900 schools nationwide. Her most recent achievement is that she got to see the Pope. So I hope that she will tell you some about that. Sister Gilchrist?
Right, you hear me okay? All right, I'll be telling you a little bit about my school so you know the context in which we have implemented strategies to answer some of these challenges that Dr. Tridas has been talking about. It's amazing. We used to spend a lot of time together, and now it's less and less time. But he always gives me something new to take away. And I am just so grateful for all that he has done really in all of Southwest Florida, particularly for years, for kids with learning disorders. We would like to clone him, but I have to tell you, if we're going to get into cloning, I'm going to have to clone my little cat first. After that. All right, we have a school that is outside of Sarasota, Florida, and we have children of varying types of abilities, disabilities. If you came on campus, you probably would notice a lot of difference. We have a couple of kids who have an obvious type of a syndrome, but most of all, these are kids who really, really struggle learning-wise, emotionally, and socially. So we've had to develop programs around their needs that have become critical to us. And we'll talk about them a bit as we go on. Basically, we follow the Florida Sunshine Standards for curriculum, but we deliver it differently. In the morning, we work very intensely on the subject that pretty much attacks the organizational pieces of the brain. But as the day goes on, we really, as we say, shift to the Disney side of the brain and try to enhance that plasticity of the brain that's needed to compensate for parts that are not working really fluidly. So some of the extra programs that are included in our curriculum and in our day are, we have yoga therapy. It's not a religious program. It helps with sensory integration. We have an enormous pet therapy program. We have 4 mini horses, 1 regular horse, 10 lovebirds, a German Shepherd, a rabbit, and 3 cats. And our mini horse program is the most developed. We have 3 people on campus that have been have background plus training in that area. And all these programs are not just for show, they actually help the basic needs of the children. Later on, we'll talk about our Thrive program, that is a specific way of teaching that tends to help children with their memory. And let's see, over and above that is our executive function strategy component, which I'm sharing with you most today. My slides, if you want my slides, you can email me, Sister Gilchrist. Don't copy the whole name on the flyer, just sistergilchrist@gmail.com. And I can give you the slides. Over the years, I have really seen, not just in kids with learning problems, but all kids, faulty executive functioning strategy. The structures that they have been embedded in have really not been helpful for the classrooms, nor helpful for social skills. We see a lot of negative learned behavior in students that are coming in who have not only not become strategic about their learning, but they have learned behaviors that are more than distracting, taking them in the wrong direction for sure. There's a need, I think, in all schools, but especially for kids with reading problems, attention deficits, emotional disorders. We have to move some kind of scaffolding device into their environment to prop them up so that they eventually become automatic in the types of responses they have to academic and social demands. The scaffolding, when we teach the strategies, comes with explanation of a strategy, and then together as a class, rehearsing it over and over, then having every student commit it to memory, and then application of that strategy in different times during the day and evaluate. Basically what we do is the whole school has 1 or 2 strategies a month. For the month of September, we had an attention strategy slant and an organizational strategy called PREP. And if every teacher teaches it with a poster type setup and uses it in that subject area, then the strategy will generalize from one classroom to the other. I know, I've been in special ed for 43 years, something like that, okay? And I've learned that one of the most difficult things, not just with children with exceptionalities, but in any classroom, you can teach them something in your classroom, and then they go to the next classroom, it does not occur to them to use that. For instance, if you're teaching them to write an essay question, or you're teaching them to write a paragraph, when they go into a social studies class and there's a question that requires a paragraph response, they're not going to transfer you what you've taught in your classroom to that classroom unless you practically go with them. So the way we have gotten around making these strategies stick is by using it everywhere, and the school using the same ones. We're now on a social skills strategy, a common strategy, which we'll see later. Why should we develop a strategic classroom? For these reasons. Students, as Dr. Tridas was saying today and last night, need to be demystified about their learning abilities and disabilities. They need to know what's working, what isn't working, and feel like they can take charge of it. I've often said that none of our students lived during this era. A few of you probably had. When there was a gas station, you pulled up and you didn't have strategic students who really learn how to learn and have a method. I've seen over the years they're much more successful, not just in school, but in their jobs and in their marriages. The stability of students that I've had over the years in those areas, in employment and in their family, is above the national norm, the ones who are really strategic. I had a student that I didn't even know she was really doing this. It was years ago. I had a resource class in a high school, and I taught a lot of these strategies, and she never raised her hand. But evidently, she was remembering everything I taught, and in her bedroom at home, she made it into a classroom and used, webs, and she used all kinds of memory devices. That girl is now making a 6-figure income and has 4 kids. But, she became strategic. We talk to the kids about the strategies, why we need them, and what goals we have for these strategies. And we foster what Eric was talking about in terms of metacognition, making them aware of their thinking process and how to use processes which will help them in almost every subject. Okay, we'll get right into a strategy so you know what I'm talking about, and then we'll get into different areas. The TAPE strategy addresses attention and memory demands. What we do with a strategy like this is make a nice poster board with TAPE down the side, and we go through each section what these letters stand for, and we practice them together a lot. Then the teacher fades. And if we're organized enough on the front of your desk, the strategies that classroom teacher would be using the most with their students are taped on the desk, so that a teacher walking around the room just put his or her finger on that strategy, and they'll remember, oh yeah, this will help. You know, so it's like a big deal in the beginning when we teach, we fade off, and then we keep it alive by calling on students, hearing them to rehearse or to recall for everybody the contents and the strategy. But it becomes embedded so much that after a while you don't notice it a whole lot. The tape. Tune in is the attention part of it. Asking and answering questions in class. Research proves that the more you're active in a class, raising your hand, being called on, that your grades improve. Parallel to that participation, putting it in your own words and learning how to paraphrase. In some cases, we have a student who's a paraphraser for the day. Okay, what did I just say? And the student will come up with a pithy little remark. So they learn to paraphrase by modeling. And then expand, connect what you just learned to something else you know. We talk about the closet idea, that if your closet's organized, that you might have your pants all on certain hangers, you know, in one part of your closet, shirts in another, jackets, sweaters, all that in their place on these hangers. You get new information, you open your closet, which is your brain, and you hang that new information where it belongs. But you need to, think about it. You need to keep that process going. The more practice you have, the more automatic it becomes. All right, the prep strategy. The prep strategy is a strategy to keep kids organized and ready for class. You know, over the years, it has really annoyed me when we waste so much time at the beginning of class, and students don't have what they need, and they don't know what we're on. They have no clue that, the test is coming up or anything like that. So at the beginning of class, we have them do a prep. And this strategy in our master's program that Eric and I conducted for teachers, this strategy came up the highest in our active research. We have a lot of active research on these strategies. This one made the biggest difference. Prepare materials for the task. Okay, here you are in a science class. You say, all right, what do you need? Get your backpack. You need your book. You need your ruler. You need your graph paper. You need your pencil. And you have those things out. Don't have anything else out. It starts very nicely if they have nothing on their desk and they only take out what they need. And then review what you already know about the subject. Okay, what are we on in math? We're on addition and fractions. Okay, what do you know about addition and fractions? Something simple. And that's when they get into their closet. Okay, in my closet, we know this about fractions. And they're in these categories. How to reduce them, how to add them, how to carry, how to subtract, those kinds of things. So I'm in that closet and I'm thinking about what I already know. So my brain's ready to take in new information, hang old new information in that closet next to old information. So now I'm ready to have a positive mindset. For instance, I'm gonna pay attention for like 12 minutes before I take a break in my brain, a brain break, before I start imagining something or drawing something or asking to get a drink of water. So that might be their positive. I'm gonna pay attention so well for 12 minutes and then pinpoint goal. I really want to pass the quiz on Thursday. And so the students have individual E's and P's. Now during make a big deal about teaching this strategy, if the whole school is teaching it, it helps with transition. I don't know about your students, but our students who have disabilities have terrible times of transition. You think Monday is like everybody's refreshed. It's the worst day because they're not used to structure from the weekend and they're not used to they don't have their brain organized for the day. So this not only helps us transition students from home to school, but from class to class, from what they were just doing to what they're going to do. Because our students do not move along well without cues and prompts. So we scaffold, we get in their brain, hold it up so they can get more automatic about transitioning. And we have a lot of students in the autism spectrum, and they're everywhere. And they have some significant problems with transition. And that pinpointing the goal, that helps them take ownership of what they're about as well. The time strategy is good for working class, independent work, but also homework. I'll probably focus on homework with this. And you have to know that these strategies were not just put together as an idea for developing something in the executive function part of teaching. They were developed out of desperation. Every single one of these is because, most of the kids are having trouble with this. And for years I was doing, let's say, advocacy work in schools, giving conferences to teachers and to administration on how to have inclusive supports in regular classrooms. And in the beginning, we were helping individual students that have problems that are in mainstreaming the regular classroom. But what we saw is that takes an awful lot of time if you focus on just 2 or 3 kids in your classroom to get them strategic. The best way to do it is just teach it to everyone. And I didn't know how this was going to go down, but after a while, it's like, wait a minute, everybody's doing better. And then it doesn't put those kids with learning problems in isolation as much. Okay, so T, talk to yourself. Okay, it's time for homework. What do I need to do? I have a spelling test coming up, and you're not going to watch any TV until we find that the kids have some control over what they're working on, that they can say, okay, I'm going to work for 17 minutes. Then I'm going to take my dog out and play ball with the dog for like 5 minutes. Okay, and I'm coming back in. I'm going to work for another 22 minutes, and then I'm going to have some chocolate chip cookies. Okay, and they need to reward themselves. I'm going to work for 37 minutes, and then I'm going to call my friend. Of course, somebody has to oversee this chunking part of rewards, okay? That chunking has been very, very effective, but not only at home, but in class as well. We actually chunk our instructional time. I'll show you how we do this. But then energy should fit the task, meaning, if they're really good at their spelling words, they don't need to have 3 hours for homework, 1 hour for spelling, 1 hour for math, 1 hour for social studies, they may need only 10 minutes for their spelling. Because if they put too much energy into every single task, they're going to be worn out mentally by the time they get to their social studies. And that includes basic skills in working as well. For instance, if they're ready to spell words and they want to get them right, they want to remember them, and they're carving those words onto the paper, and they're kind of running, and they're using their whole arm instead of just their wrist and the pencil grip. If they work with their pencil, they're losing mental energy. We try to save the mental energy for the things that are the most demanding. The needs strategy. Years ago, I was working in a resource unit in a school, and one of the kids that was referred to me, his desk was such a nightmare. I think I spent an hour on the floor with him deciding, what he should keep. And then we started looking at backpacks. Backpacks can be really scary. We have the right to search backpacks, at least in Florida, okay, but I would prefer the kids to empty them out for me. Because here and then you find candy wrappers, roaches, whatever. Snake skins, and those types of things. So anyway, the neat strategy. This is also a transition strategy, besides an organizational strategy. At the end of the day, or at the end of a class, kids are running out. Can I get out first so that I can see my friend on the sidewalk? I want to get out because my mom promised me first in the car line. So they're not listening or thinking. And what we try to say to them, you need to do this. You need to get strategic about moving from school to home or from class to class. So notice what other kids are taking home with them, what they're putting in their pack. Eliminate what's unnecessary at least once a week. Get rid of all that garbage in there. The notes people have been trying to pass you, things like that. Get rid of these things. And then act slowly. While you're getting ready, do not rush. Take your time, and then you're going to be able to focus and you're going to get good feedback. And then track the teacher, because at the end of the class, and the end of the day, a teacher could be up there saying, okay, bring this permission slip in. Remember, this is your last chance for being on that field trip. Holds it up. Bring this in tomorrow. Well, our Russian kids are not listening. I'm not out of here. Well, we try to get them to look for those clues for assignments and for requirements, and then they'll be the better set. So that's the neat strategy. Okay, we just did this one. Oh, I'm upside down, so it's up there. There we go. All right. And back to homework a bit, but we teach it during the day to the students, but much more effective with a lot of these strategies is when we explain to the parents at a meeting and give them copies. Because there's things that parents can do to make their life less stressful at home. I just know that between the hours of like 5:30 and 9, there could be terror in home environments over homework. And one of the things I suggested to parents is to have 2 plastic tubs near the door when the kids come in. The one is to things that you're gonna need to deal with and take back to school tomorrow, and the things you need to leave home for mom, dad, or whoever's working with you. They could be newsletters, it could be notes from teachers, so on. So one tub is what you're gonna be, some of which you're gonna be using tonight and taking back to school tomorrow, which will also include your homework, and the other tub is things that are just gonna stay home. And I've said this over years, I couldn't believe it. We had this nurse that worked in our school for some time, and their kids were in this program that Eric and I were at. And we were doing some sorting around in our school with stuff in our closets. I said, oh my gosh, I said, we need a couple bins. She said, you know what, I got some at home, I'll bring it in tomorrow. Now these kids were already in college. One kid got to teach in our school, both of them had dyslexia. But anyway, she brings these bins from like 15 years ago that she had at home. She says, oh yeah, we did that. She says it worked. But anyway, The classical music in the background while they're going over their homework, okay? We're in a research program that I'll be showing you that shows the usefulness of classical music. All right, not doing something so distracting after you study, like being on an electronic game or being watching a really involved TV program. You want to keep that brain like soothed with the information you're storing for a test. Okay, have something that has protein in it for a snack before you go to bed. Peanut butter does the trick. A cracker for most kids are just a spoonful of peanut butter, and then think of only positive things as you sleep. So some of these suggestions are for students. When Eric and I worked on this inclusion program for 32 schools, what we did was try to give students things that they can do to help themselves and become more responsive learning, what teachers can do to accommodate, and what parents can do. And again, this was done out of desperation, because there were a bunch of teachers that said, no, I don't think so. We're not going to be doing that. Okay, so we thought, well, if they see that the students are loaded with things they have to do to help themselves, and the parents are, they might jump on as well. We were talking about this last night. When I was assigned to go from school to school and get more classrooms strategic in this manner. And I was up in front of the high schools where the worst, especially the high schools that were run by priests. They were this one high school principal got up in front of the staff before I gave my presentation. He said, okay, here's Sister Gilchrist. She thinks she's a statue of liberty. Come, all you're sick, you're ill, whatever. She takes them all in. So they were all laughing and everything. I thought, oh, good introduction, it's real positive. I found a t-shirt for him with the Statue of Liberty on it, put in his mailbox. But what I'm saying is the opposition that there used to be in a lot of schools, even though there's been legislation since the 1970s to support kids with learning problems, there's still people that's like, not our school, that's going to pull down our scores. Not my classroom. I'm not going to be handling that kid. I'm here to teach. And so we do things in a way that look very supportive of teachers. Is to support the teachers. I mean, we are in there as teachers, and we're responsible for what's going on, and it is tough. But to give them as much equipment as possible, but for them to know that the students will carry their part as well. All right, so tell them keep your desk clear, use a prep strategy, take notes in a web form because it's using the more creative side of the brain. There's a program called Inspiration Software that really helps with that. Have pocket folders. And we start with the youngest kids with this. While the teacher's talking, sit straight, lean forward a bit, act interested even if you're bored, nod once in a while, and track the teacher. I tell them, you can fake it until you make it. Even if you are not paying attention, you do these things, you're gonna look good. I was unfortunately sent as a sister in place of another sister to a talk in California on the neutron bomb. And I had no business being there. And I was in the middle of this talk, and it was going to be embarrassing to me to leave, you know, because it just wasn't my thing. So I was working on lesson plans in the middle of this talk and practicing the strategy while it was going on to save face. So we all use it. By the way, you are all slanting. Thank you very much. And you're really slanting for Eric's talks. We talk about tape. All right. It's taken a while for me to get my teachers to really go along with this, but classical music, 60 beats per minute, does something to soothe the brain and refresh it. And we say that they're making new neural nets. It's like getting a whole new net ready to receive information in the next class or the second half of the class or whatever. So there's a CD called Mozart IQ, one Mozart for Kids, that Gary Lamb, L-A-M-B, he has at least 12 discs of music along this line. And it's very soothing for everyone. This is a memory strategy. These are almost in a hierarchy of simple to more complex. With math facts, multiplication facts, spelling words, you look at it, you try to commit it to memory, you cover it with your hand and close your eyes, and then you peek, you know, to see if what you remembered is what's underneath your hand. It's remembering and checking. This strategy is good for learning spelling words, learning your ABCs, learning math facts, learning formulas and algebra, the types of things you just have to commit to memory, and that's it. This is more intense, and this is one of those strategies that in our active research produce the most gains in students on a middle school and high school level, and Eric referred to that a bit. And that is, you know, they know that a test might be on Thursday or Friday. So Monday, start working on your plan, 3-day memory plan. And you write out, we have forms for them to fill in. What are you going to do day 1, day 2, and day 3 to get ready? You hand that plan in on Tuesday, you're going to get points for handing a copy of that plan in. And then you're going to get points for using the information from that plan on your test. Day 1, figure out what kind of questions should be on that test. Notes, review sheets, vocabulary, bold print, go through that. And it's not that hard of a job to do. They feel like they're getting into it some. Day 2 is when they get messy. Make your own flashcard, make webs, study with a partner, make your own tests, really get into it. And then day 3, you're really memorizing it. You're really going over the material, you're practicing, you're using. If you're really with it, you'd be using a tape recorder when you're talking to yourself. I did this before one of my comps on the master's level. In fact, it was in Milwaukee, and I went through all this stuff. I did, week 1, week 2, week 3, and by week 3, I had all this stuff taped, and I was walking along Lake Michigan, I believe, just looking at things and hearing myself talk. So I was brainwashed very well. And I felt very, very confident, okay? Got into the comps, and one of the teachers came in, and who was going to be in, it was an oral comps we were taking. And she said, I'm just so nervous. She said, on the way here, I heard the national anthem play on the radio, and I started crying, And I thought, that's too much. Everything's under, I don't feel like this is affecting me that much. It came for, when I was finished with my part of the comp test, I was like deteriorating, I could tell. I don't know why I'm sidetracking on this, but someone was talking about kids with Tourette's syndrome. And, I've had kids with Tourette's syndrome, I pretty much know what can happen and so on. But they mentioned barking, and all of a sudden I started laughing. It was so inappropriate. I was like having this kind of mental meltdown because it was all over. So you can strategize yourself to death, but there's that confidence level you gotta have that things are gonna work out. The writing strategy, this is also very effective. Most teachers don't want to go to all this work, but let's say you're talking about the Civil War, and you want the students to know the cause and the outcome, the generals, some of the key battles that went on. Have them draw a limo, you have to draw something with a lot of parts on it. So the cause would be under the hood, and the outcome would be in the trunk, and the battles would be on the wheels. So they just tell me you can get a limo with 18 wheels on it, so you get a lot of facts on there. And then the doors would have the generals. Using a football field, the parts of the football field. But this works, both of these things with parts, say a limo or a football field, not a pizza, because a pizza has, you really don't distinguish what's on a pizza that you buy. My brother does, because he does a bunch of franchises, Papa John's. He actually has people take pictures of their piece to make sure his employees are getting their right amount of what on each piece of pizza. But for the writing strategy, it has to be something with distinguishable parts. So you're teaching, and if it's a unit, they start putting information in the first day, and then they see that there's more information accumulating. So the second day, they're gonna fill in other parts, and third day, more and more until they're ready for the test. And then they use that to remember what kinds of things they were learning and what could possibly be on the test. Then when they go to the test, they're going to remember these types of things because they'll picture. And so you're moving into the visual part of their brain, and colorful part of the brain, four color pens, using all that with it. And they'll say, oh, I'm gonna really impress somebody in that essay question. I have something on the hood ornament. Yes?
Do you find with that strategy that when you move to a different topic, the same picture is helpful, or do you want them to move to a new picture?
It's better to use a new picture, but, because it would be better. But, in teaching that strategy, it's a great idea to spend a lot of time coming up with objects that they could use. The better thing is give them a piece of poster paper to do it. And in the middle of this, you see the E, the D, and the E, that they start talking to somebody next to them about their picture. Now, why'd you put that in the trunk? It doesn't belong here. It's not the end, okay? Or what's that doing on a wheel? That's really important. That should be on a door or whatever. So describing it to somebody next to them helps sort out and monitor their progress and how they're organizing what they're remembering. And then the repeat would be the next day. Let's put more on, let's adjust it, now let's put colors and that kind of thing. This is tedious, but very useful because they can visualize. Organizational part of the brain we use so much. So we're gonna have to give it a break. And we're gonna go over and learn some of the same things using the Disney side of the brain. And the kinds of things we incorporate, and one teacher does this magnificently, is using art with the subject, using music with the subject, computer graphics. One of our teachers teaches all of her literature units with the use of art. And she very often begins reading the piece of literature that they're going to use, reading it aloud to them, and gets them drawing what they're hearing. And then they start working with the literature themselves, sometimes reading aloud, sometimes reading silently, working with questions. But she incorporates it drawing along with the literature. She does that consistently. Very useful, very helpful. We've had some, we have kids with oppositional defiant disorders, and Eric was talking a bit about that. These kids, you cannot bribe them and you cannot threaten them. It's like, so we have to like sneak into their brains, sneak into their psyches to get them to cooperate with us once in a while. And we're finding with the art piece being incorporated in other subjects, we find that some of these kids really have artistic strengths. And they're all of a sudden blossoming. It's like, oh my gosh, this? It's a lot of come out with that. Okay. Test-taking skills. Now, in the slides I'm going to send you, I think we have in the form of 10 test-taking strategies. We'll just go over this. The long-range preparation. Noting what the teacher says more than once, copying, underlying definitions, etc. Keeping quizzes and handouts, and doing the same with all their materials. But, and these are some things that help with test-taking preps, aerobic exercises, pasta and protein together. It mellows you, but it gives you that spark in your brain. It's like a mini Ritalin if you have some protein. Classical music. Cutting down on the electronics, the 3-day memory plan that I talked about, plenty of rest, making up your own tests. Now, one of the things that we are battling fiercely in our school, and I suspect other schools are doing this, is the use of electronics. And our board chairman works with the National Institute for Policies for Health. He's in a research project that shows there are protocols that will help kids reduce some of the features of their disabilities. But starting with cutting down on their electronics. First time I met with him, we were talking about brain-based learning and all these kinds of things, and I said, I have this thing about excessive use of the computer and electronics. I just feel that something's happening to some of our students. It's not helping their disabilities. He says, I can prove you right. We had to do some studies on the national level following a very successful lawsuit that he won because his wife developed brain cancer, and they really were able to highly associate it with her use of the cell phone. So he said, coming down on electronics can only help these students. It's useful for them to have them, but they need to be monitored, okay? So much that we talk to parents about it at night, pulling out the routers at night. So that there's not all this electromagnetic radiation passing through the house all night long, okay? I said, maybe we have, believe it or not, in Sarasota, Florida, we have an Amish community. I said, if we did a study between the Amish community and other communities, living areas, I wonder what we would find in terms of autism and the rise in autism. He said, I think you would find some really good data. So the cutting down on electronics, it's a type of stimulation that after a while, eventually it's going to change the way people think. So we're on a binge to also have the parents cooperate with that also. All right, here's the test-taking tips. When they get their tests, there should be some white paper on the sides, like margins or places where they can put stuff. And the things that they have memorized that they're afraid they're going to forget as the test goes on, as soon as you get that test, do a memory data dump, put down some of those things in the margins. And then start doing the easy questions, okay? And after you do the easy questions, use your memory data dumps plus the easy questions to answer some of the hard questions. And then turn essay questions into beginning and ending sentences. So you got the question, so state it in your beginning, your topic sentence, and then use it again in your ending in a way that it ties it together. But when you need to guess, if there's multiple choice or true or false, this is what to do. They don't even tell us what to do. Well, statistically, this is what we know. Especially now, a lot of textbooks have generated tests that go along with them that a lot of teachers use, but they were made by teachers. If you have to guess, you're desperate and clueless, and it's a multiple choice, choose the longest one. Because there's more information that somehow, you have a better chance of getting it right. And if you're desperate and clueless and it's a true and false test, the ones with more information are more likely to be false. So choose, put true for the shorter ones, only if you're desperate and clueless. And they thought, oh gee, you're telling us these secrets, At least they get a little bit strategic about their test taking. But this is a strategy that if we want it to work, we have to don't just tell them about it, we have to take them through it. So we teach the strategy and rehearse the ideas, then we have a practice test. Okay, everybody do a memory data dump and nothing else. Okay, finished. Okay, now find an easy question to do. So on, someone goes, this is stupid, let me do the test. No, we're doing it this way. Everybody's gonna do this at the same time. And so we rehearse that with them a few times, and then under actual tests, you might even start them doing it, in a graded fashion. Okay, even though this is a test, we're all gonna do memory data tests and do dump and do the easy questions, etc. And then we say that with the essay questions, as well as turning around the question into a statement, give them the big map approach to an essay question. The top bun is the opening idea, and the bottom bun is the conclusion. But you don't want a big map that's missing pickles and all that nice slop that put on there. Make sure you put enough for your teacher to sink their mouth into when they read your essay answer. Okay, so we use those techniques with that. Okay. Now here's some things that students can learn to advocate for in taking tests. Ask for rewording. A lot of times the teacher will say something, give a question, and they know the answer, but it's the way it's worded. Or worse yet, another teacher monitors the test. I know in some high schools, they have separate monitors for, teachers do not monitor their own tests. And somehow that throws a kid off. They can't generalize. Use the teacher or whoever's giving it, the report is extremely important. Okay. All right, cognition scaffolds. I think Eric, these are not exactly the same slides as I have. So I'm going to digress on the slides a little bit because I want to tell you about our Thrive program that is collecting some research of what I was saying before, reversing some of the features of autism and ADD and not necessarily cognitive features, but the side skills and impulsivity and those kinds of things. Okay, this Thrive program is composed of protocols to their neck, because at night our body's supposed to make melatonin, not the kind you get over the counter, and it's natural melatonin. It helps you sleep better, and it comes to the surface of our internal life through the skin. And if it's dark enough, it promotes that melatonin production in the body. And then minimizing the lights in the room. Even a night light can reduce the solid sleep that we really need. All right, so to tell you the truth, everything that's done during the day is supposed to move towards what happens at night. That melatonin release and revival of the system. Let's say you had a very stressful day, and you go home, you have a really good sleep, okay? You're refreshed in the morning, you can feel a difference. What Dr. Carlo has found out is that over time, if you have a consistently good sleep, yes, it'll repair your day, but if it's always repairing your day, it can start repairing other things that you have, health-wise, and refresh all of your systems. So that eventually, this research is showing this, and we're helping you with this research to further show it across age groups, is that there is the reduction of the symptoms of autism and ADHD. Those are his two targets. And what we're doing right now, we have kids age 6 to 22 on the campus, and we have little kids, but all the way up to, we started a little college for kids with disabilities, a 2-year agricultural college, so we can take this into adulthood. It's working. Okay, so that's the sleep part. The teaching part is a couple things we do to keep the memory alive in our kids. Is that we always teach in triads. Every teacher has a poster board that's laminated where they put the 3 things they're going to do in their class during that class time. You know, we're going to review our spelling words. We're going to write compound sentences. And we're going to get ready for this test or whatever. When the kids, for some reason, things in 3 seem to be internalized better. For instance, if you said, my name is Sister Gilchrist, I live in Miami City, Florida, but I teach in Sarasota. There's 3 things there. If I just said, my name is Sister Gilchrist and I live in Miami City, the association isn't as strong. But if you can connect 2 other things about the person to their name, your likelihood of remembering is a lot better. So we try to connect things in 3s. Then, in most cases, we people have been so attentive. A lot of the information we've been giving out is a little heavy. For some of you it isn't, but for a number of you it is. Well, I'm not practicing what I'm preaching here because we can attend for 20 minutes pretty well. After that, we start deteriorating a little bit. We're not as focused. So we have our teachers, the first part of the period, 20 minutes of direct instruction. And then after that, it's application time. And they're either doing some work on their own, or they're coming up with a project, or they're having individual conferences with the teacher, while music is playing, and hopefully something constructive artistically that goes with what they just learned. And that does a few things. It embeds the things they've learned in their memory better. Just like it's like a catch time for the information they just learned. But it prepares their brain to learn new things in the next class. It's the making new neural nets time. So we do those types of things to maximize their memory absorption, and we call it the Thrive program. We've been collecting some testing data on our kids to show improvement, but the most improvement we're finding is, believe it or not, in the social skill area for the students as a result of implementing the Thrive program. And I think I'm going to move ahead to those, and then go back to thinking skills. All right. Our school is full of students with low impulse control. And Eric covered a lot of that information very well. I mean, they're capable, a lot of our kids are really capable of acting appropriately, but they don't reflect before they act. and giving them strategies and mechanisms for planning their behavior and monitoring their behavior has helped quite a bit. The one that we start with everyone is a calm strategy. We say, one of the hardest things is if our kids get in trouble, they're very good at blaming someone else or coming up with another story. We have a kid who will, he's in trouble and will say, what happened here? You go, oh, that, I wasn't involved in that, I didn't do that. But you want to hear about something else that happened this morning? So he'll think of another story about someone else who could be in trouble to take the focus off him. Defensive, very defensive. And I usually say, all right, that's your first story. Now you want to tell me what really happened. And it's because kids have a natural instinct for saving themselves, for preventing themselves from getting hurt in some way. So they almost have to lie in order to protect themselves. You let them lie, and then you say, okay, that obviously wasn't true. Besides, these pins, you always wonder what these pins are right now. Those are cameras. And if I'm not looking in that direction, I'll still know. I know the information. Besides, I also have 2 other kids that if I call them, I bet you they have the answers. So I have a way of like trapping them into saying the truth. We had a kid who used to plug up toilets and sometimes pull out all the plugs in the computers and the technology room and you knew it was him. And I go to him and I go, you know what? We have this problem in the computer room that somebody was in there and just trashed the place. He goes, that's funny. He said, I was in there earlier and everything was still plugged in. Wait, we were not talking about what was plugged in, but you get them in, they want to be helpful. They're very, very clever. But we try to get them to, look, you get in trouble, or if there's a problem between you and another student, slow down. C, calm. A, act like Snoopy. Snoopy says a kiss on the nose will always turn aside anger. So if you're in trouble, be nice. And that might just make things a bit better. And then listen, truly look like, you're listening, you care about what the person's saying, whether you probably didn't do it, but at least listen. And then mellow out. So the calm strategy, actually the people who benefit the most from this are the teachers using it themselves. Preventing aggression. We have aggression problems in our school. We have kids who come because they have, it seems like a lot of new terms dealing with emotional issues, but the explosive disorder that was called explosive. Pardon me? Yeah, I think it's just called explosive disorder. We have kids that, pardon me? No. Well, it's still happening. Okay, so Eric was reminding me we had a kid in our school who was talking, like, I'm gonna hurt this kid or this kid, and I'm always thinking every time something happens at a college or in a movie theater or whatever, I think, it has to be one of my kids. And I had this boy that their father does or their mother, and they just have vice versa. They have so much anger in them. So we've had to come up with a number of things to deal with this. And some of the things I'm showing you here are in our social, we have an actual social skill class every day for every kid. And for the older kids, we have a specific anger management class where, they bring in these case studies for them to look at and to talk about. They go, this is so stupid, I don't have any anger issues. You think, oh, I have. But eventually they start realizing it and they go, well, that happened to me, that happened to my brother, whatever, and they start opening up. But, of course, restricting tools of aggression. You can put up all the signs you want in the school. And, we have a sign that says no guns beyond this point, this kind of thing. But I'm never going to have one of those signs that says drug-free environment with a cross through it or aggression-free or no bullying, because it's going to happen. And I want to be honest about it. These things are going to happen in school, no matter how many signs you have or how many programs. But for us to do the best we can. Okay, I'll back up in a few minutes here. I'll get a few other skills for you. Okay, our kids come to the school usually for a learning problem, and then you read in between the lines and see they do have emotional problems. We have kids with anxiety disorders, bipolar, schizophrenia, some really deep problems. They come because of their problems, but you know what? They stay because they make friends. Because they haven't had friends before, and because they love their teachers. We have great attendance. There's times we like a handful of kids to stay home. But they come because they feel good. They feel like they can, someone's going to accept them in school. There's always someone. So, but we have a need to teach our students how to make friends and keep them. And the group strategy is one of those. For instance, some kids are playing soccer, and they're outside. But there are basketball hoops out there as well. Come along, you want to be part of this group. So a lot of our kids will just make some kind of a ridiculous statement and try to brag. They'll pick up the ball and they'll dribble it to a hoop and make a basket. And they think, well, now they know how cool I am. It doesn't work. We have kids that they overhear someone talking about a social studies test, say, she really didn't prepare us for that. It was so tricky. And they're going on about it, really negative. And a kid will come along and say, oh, I thought that was a piece of cake. Does not give them any points. They tend to not know how to fit in. You tell them, try to fit in with what people are doing in the mood they're in, unless they're doing something wrong. And then you don't fit in that group. So the first thing is give them a chance to see you. Don't barge in, just go yo, or just hang out there or smile at them. And then read what they're doing. Read how what the feeling is. Is it excitement? Are they sad? Are they angry? And then you get into what they're about. Do what they're doing and contribute to the discussion. But if it isn't working, understand when it's time to go. Well, then what? What do you do when you know they don't want you there? I don't know. I said, you need to get lost. You need to leave. But the way you leave is really very important because you can lose your dignity. You can really look ridiculous. You can look like you're a nerd or something. So you need to say something like, I need to drink the water. I'll see you later. Or I forgot to feed my dog. Or I tell them, I just pretend like I'm getting a text message. So then I leave, so that I can have my dignity as I have a pleasant exit. These strategies really need role play. And they won't do them, and I find out the kids will not do these social skills strategies unless they failed in that area. So we teach a strategy, we role play the strategy, then they're out on the playground or at some event, and it just was a wipeout, and then they think, oh, well, maybe I should do that strategy. Then, realistically speaking, they're not going to remember all those letters in the group strategy. If they remember one or two of them, it can get them by. Okay, it really, it's just having something on hand to do when you're in an emergency situation, especially. The SHARP strategy. Actually, these social skills strategies were developed for the students. I had some students who really got better in their academic area. They were little kids, second graders. And I was really proud of this one kid. His report card went up, and his organizational skills up and everything. He said, yeah, but I don't have any friends. And the other kids said, well, you know, why? You know, he just barges into things, and he's loud, and he smells or whatever, and that's why. So we sat down and came up with these things. These little kids helped me with these. We came up with these things so that they can have friends and keep them and not be bullied. This is an anti-bullying strategy. If kids are bullying, and you have to know, I have a lot of kids that come to school. We were coming here because we were bullied at such and such school. And you know, I've learned that there was a reason they were bullied. They were probably bullying first. Over time, you think, yeah, well, what were you doing, you know, to bring it on? There are kids who elicit bullying activity out of their parents, out of teachers, out of kids. They just like, it's like you want to like strangle them, you know. But it's something that sometimes that they're doing. And so we teach them to role play. You know, show a confident face, have a humorous remark. Let's say they might be making fun of your hair. It's August, you come back to school and they're making fun of your hair. And go, oh yeah, my mother used to use a bowl. Now she's whacking it off with a garden instrument or something. Say something ridiculous. And then they forget that they're gonna go after you and bully. Act bulletproof. They say mean things to you. Think of these comments like jelly beans or like popping off your chest. Your chest that come through, you know. Or our kids say act like an armadillo. This really gross animal in Florida with this shell like structure around it. And you know, if you throw a stone in it, most stones aren't gonna hurt it. Respond slowly, or you might say something totally stupid, like, I'm gonna tell. Or, you know, you just don't like these. You just don't say anything if you can't come up with something that is intelligent. And then know your strengths. Know who you are. And, you know, our mission statement is all about dignity, helping students feel their dignity. And if they start learning, and a lot of you are doing some wonderful interventions to help your students feel they're intelligent. It's like, yeah, you're smart. I had a kid a couple of weeks ago came to me and he said, you know what, I'm being called on in class to read. And by now, that teacher should know I can't read. Because, you know, I've got dyslexia. I'm just tired of this. You never talked about before. I'm like, you have dyslexia? I said, you know what? Yeah, that's right. I forget because he seems so smart. And then I started saying things like, which are true. I said, you know, I've seen slides of people's brains who have dyslexia. And they have these things on the top of their brains. I think they're ectopias. And they're like areas of strength. Like you have a vertical intelligence in one or two areas. Do you want me to tell you what I think are your areas of vertical intelligence? So I started saying it. I said, you are with a lot of our college students. We partner with a state college, and some of the teachers have the background and some don't. So we're trying to get them to really analyze the teaching style of every professor. But we do this in middle school and up as well. The self-strategy, studying the style. Okay, the teacher wants homework on this counter every time you come in the classroom. Don't wait until she asks for it. Come in, put it down, sit down, okay? This is the way this teacher teaches. Most likely, if you have two tests in a row that looks pretty much the same, that format's going to come up again. This teacher likes to have multiple choice. This teacher likes fill-ins. Get used to it. And look how this teacher grades. And then light up your goals in that class. So you can't get everything, but if you learn what's going on and you predict, you become a good predictor in that class, you're going to be more successful. And then this strategy, this is involved, and we're really working with kids on this right now. We're teaching kids about temperaments, the basic four temperaments. And first of all, we define them, and then we use cartoon characters to explain the temperaments. Like, Snoopy saying, like Lucy is choleric, but you're really supposed to have two temperaments you come out with eventually. So we look at story characters, cartoons, and all that, and then the students take a temperament test. Our kids took the temperament test last week. What was killing me, I see them outside and they're labeling me. They say, oh, you're this and this, and that's exactly what we want them to do. Because once they learn their own temperaments, they'll start looking at other people and say, you know what, that person is choleric and melancholy. I'm not going to goof around with that teacher and expect to get anything. Or that teacher's sanguine. If I crack a joke, we're going to start a big conversation. And so we want them to try to identify temperaments in other people, but they shouldn't go up to a teacher and say, by the way, you're such and such, or whatever. But this is a really good way for them to start advocating. Okay, you understand the restrictions of teachers. Even if everybody has been in service the same way by a speaker or the principal or something, not every teacher is at the same degree of following the plan. And I know this so well. I mean, we have things that we do at our school that are really, I feel are really, really essential. But there's degrees to how people are carrying it out. So, for instance, I had a kid come to me some years ago and said, I could be on the honor roll, but this is what happened. I got a D in math, and I was 1 point away from a C. I still could have been on the honor roll, not only A's, but it was like a B average. Wouldn't you think that teacher would know how important that would be to me? And he was, he started being very negative, and the other students said, everybody in Sarasota County knows that Dr. M never averages up grades. You've got to live with it. So, there has to be them to understand the people they're dealing with. I said, it's the same, when you're dealing with teachers, it's the same as dealing with employers. So you've got to look at it that way. You can't always get what, I saw this on magazine in the airline pocket yesterday. Success is not getting what you deserve, it's getting what you negotiate. Okay? So, C, create alternatives for teachers. I blew that test, but I bet that I could do better if you would read it to me. Or if you can't read it to me, if I could fix the questions I failed and get partial credit at least. Or if I could take the test home and do it over. The teacher looks like this. I said, they'll feel guilty if they turn all those down. So you have to give them choices when you're advocating and negotiating. And then if you're really smart, twice the grading period, you'll go to each teacher and say, how am I doing? Am I close to a B, or, do I have stuff missing? Even if you know everything, you show up, you let that teacher know that you're interested in your improvement. When it comes down to the wire and you're giving that final grade to you, they're gonna give you a grade for the most part. But don't do it like, remember when Eddie Haskell and want leave it to be, or don't be a fake, go in. And don't ask how you're doing the day before report cards. It's gotta be when there's time that you can still improve. And then, sorry to say that people that you have attention problems, you have reading problems, you have some learning problems, you have to work a lot harder than other people. You really do. And you have to expect more of yourself than other people expect of them. And you have to start doing that now. And you know what's going to happen? When you get into your first job, or you get into college, you're going to be on top of a lot of students. There are going to be kids who've been getting A's their whole life, but you're going to be already expecting more of yourself, already strategic about your learning. and you're gonna do better. You're not gonna waste the first semester tuition your parents pay for you in college. And then the D is decide to succeed. Now, we have really role-played the strategy. In fact, we have a video about it. It's so funny because I played the student, and the students played the teacher. I think Eric was talking about the tapes that we have from our parents and everything. You know, like, when I was your age, I walked 3 miles in the snow to get to school and all this stuff. Okay, what was funny in the role playing, when we filmed this, was that we had 3 different kids with a teacher with different temperaments, and I was approaching them. These kids sounded like teachers, you wouldn't believe it. They put on so well, oh my gosh, you're saying exactly what I say or what so-and-so says. They know exactly how we operate. But anyway, it's one of those strategies that definitely needs role playing quite a bit. All right, adaptability. Our students have trouble going from one setting to another, especially if they come to a special school or a new program. There's got to be strong leadership. And I was thinking before, if I could borrow Eric for like a semester in my school, and just let him be there. He's got this strong voice and this kind of thing. Even though they act tough, if you're really convinced of what you're about and you just don't give in, they're going to adapt better. Use of bells, whistles to help with change. We're on a property of 23 acres. I finally got an outside old-fashioned bell ring. We nailed it on the side of the building. And it's funny because they love this bell. And as soon as that bell rings, they start moving in. You don't have to go find them, that kind of thing. But they need things to guide them. They need structure. They hate structure in some ways, yes, they say they do, but they really need it. Certainties of schedule. I mean, we do have kids that have like terrible, little kids especially, terrible meltdowns if we switch to periods. Why are we doing this? If I would have known we were doing this, I wouldn't have come to school. It's like the sky is falling. We always have the sky falling when there's a transition of some type. But their brains are just not flexible enough to deal with that. Techniques to fail, ridicule. And I don't think it's really happening anymore in classes. I can't believe that teachers would make fun of kids because they can't read aloud, or that their paper is messy, or their handwriting is shaky, or whatever. These are things that don't work for us, like making them do something. I usually give them a choice. Okay, would you like to take this page home? This page it's a graph paper, piece of graph paper, and write the word frog inside of the box? Or would you like to be safe and boring in my office for an hour? Usually take the graph paper, because safe and boring in my office means well, I apologize, so it's over. Sometimes it isn't over. It's better when you have a true apology than make an apology. So we try to teach kids to do that. Asking why they act out. Like, why'd you do that? Okay? Sometimes what they'll do is come up with, I don't know, and that's not helpful. Punishing and threats, comparing to other students, of course, yelling. Across the board, I see when teachers lower their voice, kids listen better. I mean, the class can be almost in chaos. They just get in from somewhere, blah, 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 blah. And the teacher just starts teaching in a mild voice, and 2 or 3 kids immediately sit down and more, and that's it. And it's that voice control is just so useful. Techniques that do work eliminate teacher tension. Now, I know that if I start school assembly in the morning and my mind is already stressed about something, believe it or not, I feel like it sets the tone for the day. And the school, I have to be very careful about that because they pick up the stress level of leadership on the property and in the classroom. So being stressed as the interventionist is very detrimental to getting the success you want out of the students. You know, whatever you need to do. You know, I know I taught side by side with a couple of teachers, you know, if we like had it, we just open the door, come outside, knock on their door real quick and go, you need a break, don't you? Okay, open your door, I'll stand here a few minutes. And do that, come back in a few minutes, start over. You know, sometimes we just have to get removed from the environment, call an administrator in the office, and just get a few minutes out and then go back. And it's a lot better for us. In arranging the room to avoid problems. Of course, being in education 42 years, I think I've tried every kind of seating chart that could possibly be. And I definitely, for me at least, having kids facing each other has never worked. It's just so, you know, you're helping them socialize. Yeah, you are. I mean, that's all they'll do. So, you know, the straight rows have been very useful. And then standing 3 feet away from an angry student, but if you're getting really angry, get near the door. Because you can get tracked in where you are. And, you know, have a cell phone, you know, you can get somebody if you are being tracked with an angry student. Awareness of body stance. I do allow some verbal venting for the kids, you know, let them get over, okay, you said enough, I heard it all. And I don't like your words, by the way. Okay, but let's start over and talk about it differently. Provide some choices. You want to say that that teacher, that student was unfair to you, instead of using that foul word you just used, what do you really want to say happened there? You know, and then provide choices. What do you want to do about it? Let's come up with some choices. Okay, that choice won't fit. You're going to set a limit. You're not going to go back and find your cell phone and bust it for them. You're not going to do that. Okay, physical restraint is a last resort. You know, you probably don't deal with the need for that. We don't have it too often, but I do know that, you know, your arms, their arms behind your back and your arms clasped in your arms can help very much. You have to watch that they don't above your head. You know, so you got to get in the way that they're in a chair. Get them down and get somebody else immediately to help them. Never take behavior personally. I used to always take it personally. It's like, what am I doing wrong? This is not working. And if students like hate what I'm teaching or the way I'm delivering it, I used to take it very personally, but that just creates stress for ourselves. Try to censor students in private, you know that. Be true to the promise of consequences. If you say, you know, do that one more time at break, I'm calling your mother. You gotta do it, of course. Try not to label students. Just say, you know what, you never tell the truth, or you're always in trouble, those kinds of statements. It's better to say things in observable terms. Like, you know what, you seem to always come up with a story when something like this happens. Or you did get out of your seat 12 times, you know, things like that. Be observable. And then informing parents of positives. And using humor whenever you can. Humor kind of like somehow lets out endorphins. And I don't think we have time for any questions later. I think we're pretty much at the end. Aren't we, Mary?
Yeah.
I do. Okay. All right. Yes, some questions? Okay. Yes.
Is the school residential or is it day school?
It's a day school. I'm going to do that to myself.
Do you allow visitors to come?
Pardon me?
Do you allow visitors to come?
We do. Let me tell you something unusual. It was alluded to before. I started a community of sisters. Our mission is really children with special needs. And we started having vocations, people who felt called to be a sister coming to our community. So I have a few sisters. We have an inclusive community. I do IEPs for nuns, just so you know. Okay. Eric sent me one of my first persons, and honestly, it's amazing. It's amazing how people can grow if they, you know, are coached and so on. The person he sent me has all these complications. Fetal alcohol syndrome, which usually means that their cognitive skills are going to be stabilized low, at like 3rd, 4th grade level. Dyslexia and ADHD, and in the ADHD, the H for me means heavy duty ADD. This person has integrated beautifully, and she is the assistant to our pet therapy program right now. It can be done. There's, you know, we're not meant to keep people on the margins, okay? And we also have a sister with Asperger's syndrome as well. So we live there, we live on the environment, but we don't have our students coming. And I just want to say that you're very committed people who come out on Saturday. You really care. I can tell by your faces you can care about the dignity of kids. And you are definitely in my prayers. And I know God will reward all of us for doing the best we can with these kids. Yes.
As I've looked at schools for my dyslexia across the country, I have found that it stands out in Catholic schools. There are Catholic schools that really take in dyslexia, so to speak. Is there a larger within the church initiative?
Okay, first of all, our school is not a Catholic school because we don't want to discriminate according to religion.
But
there are there's some schools in Connecticut that are day boarding schools for kids with different kinds of issues. Yeah.
but I'm saying it in a positive. That I have seen
good.
that, and that it's good to see in another.
Yeah, well, we should be doing this, you know, and our new pope is all about that. He's all about margins. Okay. So, yes.
Tell us about the experience.
My pope experience? Well, I took our little group of 5 sisters, we went up to Washington DC with no tickets to see him. And they were canonizing Unico Sarah from California, a favorite person of mine, started a missionary movement. Anyway, I wanted to go to that canonization, wanted to see the Pope, and I thought, you know, we don't have tickets, maybe we'll get near it, okay? Well, we were there the day before, and we found out that all the tickets are gone, and that everything is there's so much security you couldn't believe. And I started looking around to see if there was any spots, and I thought, oh well, I won't tell the other sisters that we don't have a chance. Okay, so then, however, the mass was at 4:15 in the afternoon, and we were there by 8 o'clock in the morning, and people were lined up that had tickets to get in. And we were I said, isn't there anywhere where we can get a spot to just look at this from afar? Was another standing room, but we could at least see the building from afar, and we could at least feel like we were participating in the mass. And we were standing up against this fence, and nobody was in front of us. I said, I'm not moving. And so when people back here, you can actually sit down on the steps. I'm not moving. I'm standing right here. So the other sisters with me pretty much did. And then another college student looked very nervous. She said, I'm just so nervous. I said, why? She said, well, the Pope might be coming by right here. And I'm, you're kidding. She said, I can't tell anybody, but I think he might. pretty soon Secret Service people started filling in, and I had an envelope for the Pope I wanted to give him. Okay, I've been trying to get this in for a year. Anyway, there was a Secret Service person, and I said to him, I said, is the Pope coming by here? And he says, I can't give out that information. I can only tell you, you are standing in a very good spot. So next question, I said, what would happen if I gave this envelope to him? He said, there'd be several of us who would tackle you. So really, the Pope, I had great pictures. The Pope came right by us. I was as close as I am to Josh, okay? And he stopped, and he looked right at us, the five of us, which is awesome. We got these great pictures, and all this stuff for him to bless. I bought water, so he blessed holy water. I had a whole bunch of it at home. Got medals, everything blessed. He was just as sweet as he could be. He's really, it's true is what they say. He's just down to earth and likes people. So that's my Pope story. Okay, thank you for.
Thank you so very much for coming. If you are interested in the door prize, be sure that you sign your name on a little piece of paper. We're going to have Sister Gilchrist pull that name out of the basket in just a moment. I also want to tell you, please fill out your evaluation. I hope you've been filling it out as you went along. And in March, we have Solution Saturday, which will be happening in Cathedral High School this year on March 12th. So if you have any ideas of people you would like to hear speak, or especially topics that you would like to see covered, please write that on the evaluation. We take that to heart, and we try to find people who can fulfill that. So here it comes. You know what? Mr. Gilchrist is busy, so I'm going to ask Dr. Tridas to pull the name out of the basket. The winner of the door prize is Doug Hess. Doug Hess. Woo-hoo. Thank you so very much for coming. I know you have been blessed by Sister Gilchrist and Dr. Tridas. So if you would please give them another round of applause. Thank you so much.